He's not the Pradhan.
Hold on. Executive director is pretty much the head.
No. Pradhan actually has to be Amritpal in WSO.
Yeah. Archaic rules.
Oh, wow. Wow. Never changing that rule.
Yeah. Amunna should be able to be put on as well.
No.
Huh?
No.
Recognize the whole human race as one. You met Ravi Singh yesterday. You can't take that away. Huh? Why are you recognizing two different human races? This is why I hang out with comrades.
I love how the Monday are picking on the Monday.
Yeah, sorry. One on violence. There's no moral compass amongst women. No, so I was the executive director, which is not the head. The president is.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the functional kind of day-to-day operation. Now I am the national director of government relations for the WSO. Still a sole board member. Harman is president.
Yeah, regional president.
Regional president Alberta.
I just changed all the titles. We just did a whole.
Yeah, Harman did a title inflation.
So before my
the
title's VP, so I went around and made all the VPs regional presidents, and then I made new titles like this.
Yeah.
He
just wanted to be like. He just wanted the kursi.
Look, they were never gonna make me an actual Pradhan because of a Monna. So I was like, yo, I'll make my own Pradhan title.
Yeah.
Your assistant to the.
He's assistant to the. Yes. He's Dwight.
Yeah.
He's the Dwight.
No, they have their own office. Discard the office you watch is based on the UK office show.
Okay.
No, we watched the US office as well.
Did you guys?
Yeah.
It's better. The US office is better.
No, you've never watched the UK version.
I have. I couldn't get into it.
Sorry, your
People look funny.
I was going to say, can we keep that as an introduction? Is that too informal for you?
Okay, let's start.
No, I'm saying.
That's it. We started already.
If you're happy with the introduction.
The US office is better than the UK office. Just with American English is better than British English.
Okay, that's too far. That's too far.
There's too many Z's in the American English, I think. So thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. We got Jaskaran Singh. And we got Hardeep Singh before. I was about to switch you around for a second.
Yeah, all money look alike. I know.
It's hard.
It's a struggle we go through. It's a struggle.
I think you say more about Singhs than look alike. So we try to explain a Singh, and he's got a beard, he's got the star. So great description.
Well, they're
guys.
defining features, right? Stand out.
So both you guys are a part of the WSO. We got the executive director over here.
Former executive director.
Formative.
Yes.
You got too many titles.
I know. I wear too many hats. Yeah. It's time I start wearing turbans. No, so that's a great shame that I don't tie a turban yet, and I hear that often from Bhai Singh.
It just clarity. So World Sikh Organization of Canada.
Yes,
Canada.
There's a difference.
It's not the full Duniya's
No.
Sikh organization.
Yeah. So now I am the national director of government relations. I've been on the board for almost 10 years now.
Okay.
So very much a part of the organization through and through over those 10 years. And then Harman Kadola, I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, so regional president for Alberta, former VP, same title, but yeah, again, been part of it for about a decade now.
Okay. And what do you guys do via your profession? What are you guys just? It sounds like you guys do a lot of comedy as well.
No. Lawyers. They're very serious people. Yeah, very serious. We take ourselves very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I was a barrister. Jaskaran, took that and decided to defend criminals, help them get out of jail. Like they should stay there. I don't know why you have to get out
where they belong.
Yeah, not with the actual.
It's troubling to me, and I'm very offended that Harman would just wholeheartedly side with the state and like arbitrary detention.
Oh, wow. Not arbitrary detention,
folks.
Meaningful detention.
Well, if they were released, it was arbitrary, and they should never have been charged to begin with.
Well, fair enough.
And so Harman's the kind of guy who, if he was in India, would be like, arrest all the Sikhs.
Wow, absolutely.
That is
just because
that is where your argument ends.
I think victims should be able to go to the the perpetrators. Yes. Like you should get a lathi, you should be able to go to jail, and you should be able to go to the person who wronged you.
Okay,
there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, restorative justice. Yes, we believe in restorative justice.
Well, definitely these guys are joking because they've done a lot for the Sikh Panth, especially if you look in Canada. But you can explain more about the great Seva and the work that you've been doing. I think one key topic to start off with, I know you guys do a lot of work on it, censorship. And it's been happening a lot if we talk about the Sikhs, for example, right? Social media, when it comes to a lot of events, even by Amritpal Singh, stuff was happening earlier this year. Can you tell us more about this censorship? Why is it happening from what can we do about it?
Look, the censorship is real, and I can pull examples both from the World Sikh Organization and Baaz, just very basic ones. Most people gather their information through social media. Like very few people are going to, www.bbc. what is your co.uk, whatever it is, right? Like very few people are going to like www.cbc.com or .ca, like reading news that way, or like buying papers. Very few people even turn on the TV to just watch like live broadcasts. It rarely happens anymore. And so where people kind of aggregate their information is social media, right? Like that is the agora, like that is the public forum where these debates happen, or where people absorb kind of the current affairs. So the number one platform, in my opinion, and it's also where I spend most of my social media time, is Twitter. X, formerly Twitter. That we're journalists, we're politicians, we're decision makers, we're news junkies, like for people that are absorbing kind of this information first and then disseminating to their own circles, is usually off of Twitter. Like think about where you send your screenshots into your WhatsApp group. It's usually a tweet. Half of Instagram is just posts of tweets like that are just now Instagram posts. And so on Twitter itself, both Baaz and WSO, as just an example, are banned in India. And so when you're talking about Sikh topics, you're talking about Sikh issues, we got to remember, like, the diaspora punches way above its weight, but in terms of population, it's very small. Like Canada has just under 1 million Sikhs. I think America's in and around 500K. I think the UK is in and around that. Like official numbers. Obviously, unofficially, that number fluctuates wildly, especially with international students nowadays.
Yeah.
So between the US, Canada, and the UK, which is the bulk of the diaspora, you're only talking about maybe 2 million, maybe 2.5 million Sikhs. And so our voices are being banned in India, where the other 25, 30 million Sikhs are, right? So like we're disconnected from our brothers and sisters. And that's a real form of censorship that kind of goes under the radar a little bit. And then there's, other kind of nefarious ways the censorship happens. The media, what they don't include in the story, right? Who are they not going to talk to? Right? Where are they being navigated away from certain voices? Well, that's an ongoing issue that takes a lot of active work to confront. Obviously, the news that's in India is obviously censored quite a bit, just in their domestic media, which is then used for like disinfo purposes and other things. So there's a lot of ways that kind of censorship manifests itself, but we've personally experienced it, right? My personal account is banned in India. And so we actually had a recent example with Instagram, where Instagram censored a WSO post on Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination. And Meta, so the organization that oversees Facebook and Instagram, censored that post and then kind of flag the account that if you post other things that we're going to have to censor, like that might put your entire account in threat. And kind of an independent news outlet in Canada covered this story and kind of blew it up. That's a form of censorship that is probably driven by some form of Indian interference at Meta, which then resulted in censorship of Canadian-produced content by Canadian organization in Canada as well on Sikh issues, right? So there's a lot of ways that it happens. It's not always linear. It's not always obvious, but it's an issue that we have to tackle quite often. I would say probably disproportionate to many other communities.
Anything to add to that, Veej?
Yeah, I think going public with this information is really important, and it's part of that narrative that we have established really well, which is India's crackdown on speech, right? India's crackdown on dissent, and we talk about their attempts to silence voices. You look at the way that they operate legally to actually go and pass laws to say that employees of social media outlets would be held personally responsible if they don't actually follow through with, banning or doing certain things. That's the consequence that staff of Twitter and Meta are going to face. And so you can think about the chill that goes through them and, how quickly they're going to be willing to censor or ban accounts, and again, so many of the big social media outlets have been willing to partner and willing to do the bidding of that regime. And it's so important for us to continue to show people and demonstrate to people that they are actually silencing, factual information, right? And it's been a large part of what we've done in Canada. What we saw in so many instances is that media in the West, it's really easy for them to just pick up a narrative out of Indian media, right? And so the Indian government places a narrative into the news there, and quickly it gets picked up by the West, and they kind of regurgitate or kind of put those perspectives forward. And the job for us as Sikhs and as a GOM is, how do you counter that? How do you deal with that? And so for Canadians, we first saw it after Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, was elected, his first trip to India. He goes to India, and before he goes there, because remember, this was a historic moment for a lot of Canadian Sikhs. A lot of MPs were elected, monthly, like I think Jar, Panj, like apne Sikh mantri bhi sige. And they go with this massive delegation to India. But this was a moment that every single time a Canadian government goes to India, the Indian government tries to get them to sign an intelligence sharing agreement, right? So this is always on the table. So when we had a conservative government in Canada, and when they went to India, like that, the intelligence sharing agreement was on the table. The Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, said, I'm not going to sign this. You guys use torture. You use illegal means to gather information. If you give us that information, it's going to be unreliable. And so now when Trudeau goes, well, India wants to do the same thing. And Trudeau, says, no. So what happens? Modi decides that I'm going to snub this guy. I'm going to embarrass him. I'm going to start these narratives about, he supports Khalistanis, right? And all of a sudden, there's a former Khalistani who was part of the delegation. This is a guy that eventually normalized his relationships with India, had photos of Modi, right? Had got his visa. And all of a sudden, the news, nobody even realizes he's there, but the Indian media has this story, right? And now it blows up into this big gaffe. Trudeau's embarrassed in India. And that forces Trudeau to say, well, okay, in order for me to save myself, I need a meeting with Modi. And Modi says, well, sign this agreement and then I'll give you a meeting. So Trudeau signs this agreement. He signs an agreement saying that we're going to share intelligence with the Indian government. And so for us at WSO, immediately, even before the trip, we had warned them on this. Afterwards, we had really gone to them and said, this is going to target Sikhs in the diaspora, right? We're going to face the brunt of the consequence of what you've just done. And sure enough, 1 year later, for the first time, in forever, they added, Sikhs as potential terror threats to Canadian sovereignty, which is absurd, right? That then, became a really rallying cry. But my point being, in the media, one of the things we had to do was start a movement to make sure that our voice was heard. And that's where we started the Ask Canadian Sikhs campaign. And if you go back, you look at how we use social media to really demonstrate that the Canadian mainstream media had totally silenced and sidelined Sikh voices. That was such an effective thing. And Jaskaran, and at the time, we had done sessions with editorial boards across the country laying out, look at how your coverage is biased, right? You're missing the Sikh voice. You're missing the authentic community's representation. You keep going back to the same tired, kind of anti-Panthic, pro-government people. This is wrong. This is offensive. And frankly, that's when we start to see coverage change. And we saw a whole new crop of young journalists who started to recognize that. Because you had people who had covered issues post-Jarasi in Canada, old, white journalists like the Terry Moleskis, like Kim Bolan, like Terry Glavin. There's several of these old journalists in Canada who have a very warped view of these issues. And they kept regurgitating them, and they were seen as the experts, right? But now they've been exposed. Terry Molesky was, and it still is, one of the most pro-India voices in Canadian media, but except now he's been completely sidelined and ostracized from Canadian media. Literally the only people who give him a platform is Indian media. It's wild. The only time you see him anywhere is doing a random talk show or panel discussion in India. And you're like, Canada ch to koi puchda nahi hai inu.
No, it's just was Trudeau high on cocaine in his plane? And to discuss this, we have Terry Molesky on Republic TV.
How ridiculous of a story. They're Trudeau's plane, because at the G20 was delayed because he had cocaine on it. I posted saying, oh, ha, 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 look at this hilarious story in Indian media. Sure enough, a Canadian media outlet picked it up.
What?
And, you're looking at this and saying, how do you expose yourself more? Even a lot of what has happened in the past, several months and several years, you see the Indian government, predicting what they're going to do by telegraphing it in Indian media, right? Those stories are already there. They're already trying to set the narrative. But exposing that and really going after, their attacks on media independence, on social media crackdowns, like it's a really important part of the story that we need to tell people.
Yeah, just on the point of censorship before Harman completely derailed this on different topics. And I'm going to suggest just throw questions to me if I'm here on.
You opened it up.
So like in sports, you have like play-by-play and color commentary.
Yeah.
Just Harman would just color commentary once in a while. I'll do the play-by-play and explain what's going on. So in any case, just to bring the conversation back after that outburst from Harman, the other aspect of censorship that's really problematic is self-censorship, right? Like media being controlled, social media accounts getting banned. Is more or less I think kind of well known and understood. The more nefarious form of censorship is the self-censorship that we do as a community, which I've always found deeply problematic, and something that we can solve as a community right away. Like there's no external factor that we have to lobby or convince, or like we have to drive some advocacy campaign of some sort. We as a community need to understand that by whitewashing or making our positions, trying to make our position more palatable for people that quite frankly just don't care about us, and they won't even if we make it palatable. It does nothing but as a disservice to our own causes and our own narratives. So, and this is one of the projects of Baaz. Like this was one of the big pieces of it was, we have to be unapologetic and authentic and kind of sharing our story. And a lot of these words are kind of cliche now. I kind of feel like I'm like talking about like self-help at this point, but you gotta be authentic self. The reality is you want to ensure that we're doing justice to our own story. We've made a habit of avoiding certain topics. We've made a habit of avoiding certain discussions and dialogues. And it's often the case that those are exactly the issues and conversations we're supposed to be having and we should be having and what people are hungry to hear. And what I found really surprising when I personally started to be more open about like my personal positions, but what I think the community's positions are on issues, that folks in media, in government, on stakeholders became much more receptive. Like it was not intuitive that was going to happen, but they became more receptive because they started hearing from more people that this is the actual position. And so now
we need some specifics in Jaskaran.
Well, no, like
and language plays a big role, right? In the words you use. Aren't you really excited to be in the Sikh temple?
Yeah, I love Sikh temples.
Like just call it a gurdwara.
Yeah,
right. The language we use is really important.
It's like Muslims say mosque. They're unapologetic. The Jews say synagogue.
Yeah.
Everyone has to conform to what they give, right?
Yeah.
Why have we conformed?
Well, and that's such a small but obvious example where that happens quite a bit. And then there's like harder topics, right? Like Khalistan, right? Sikh sovereignty. What was our history? What did happen in the 80s and 90s, right? What have we faced as a people? What have been some internal struggles? What have been some of the external forces that have been at play against us? Like if we don't articulate this and share this with folks, we're just ceding that space for others to explain it and then do a complete disservice and injustice to it. Or you provide that space to kind of Harman's point, Indian media, Indian government narratives to frame those issues. What just happened on Khalistan? Quite frankly, that is what's happened on Khalistan. There was a point in time where folks in our community self-censored on that issue. And this is not to say that that there's clear consensus on every minute detail of what Khalistan is and how it should be. I think, it's a joke that's often said, you talk to 10 folks about Khalistan, you're going to get 11, 12 different opinions, right? It's obviously a conversation that is worthy of community debate. It's a conversation that's worthy of community conversation. But if we're not willing to have it, all we're doing is we're allowing folks to have no understanding of kind of the deeper implications or realities or Sikhi or Sikh history, ityas in it, to start discussing it and butcher it, intentionally so. And so what worries me more is not so much the external censorship. I think those are issues we're always going to face. And that's not me just kind of dismissing and saying we're not going to do anything about it. Yeah. We will continue to fight it. It's a lot of fun to fight it. But it's that self-censorship which I find to be much more dangerous.
I think that point you're trying to be very insightful, but by exposing your own insecurities.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate the vulnerability.
Yeah, I was gonna cry a little bit, I don't. So it's good for the edits, the cutting you guys are gonna do.
Jaskaran, you've gone through this in your own life.
I have. Yes.
How willing were people willing to talk about the issue of Khalistan 6 years ago or more, right?
Yeah.
I think so many people have had to mature, in that progress.
Yes.
But your point, I never liked to attack
so a guy like me, I killed my ego, right? I'm trying to my best to live a guru-inspired life. So when you say these things to me, I thank you.
And attacking our own community is not my way of doing it. Right. I look at Hindustan Di Sarkar.
Yes.
I look at Brahmanwad. That's where I focus my energies. I don't focus my energies on Lata Kitching.
Yes.
Some of our fan, they have a journey to go on.
Yeah. And we're all on our own journey.
Right, absolutely.
Yes.
As Monet, we're on our journey.
We are. We're slowly marching there.
We'll get there.
We'll get there eventually. Hopefully.
Yes. That was my point.
Yes. Yes. We're living in his hukum.
Yes.
No, but in all honesty, right? Like that was an issue I struggled with. Like if I look back 5-10 years ago, it's like, okay, we won't talk about Khalistan. Let's just we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. There's a million other issues we can talk about. And the realization has come, and partly the Trudeau trip kind of made it really obvious to me that no matter how nice we try to be about, or how, again, we try to make these issues more palatable to folks that just, quite frankly, don't care or just don't like us. When push comes to shove, they're going to come and label us XYZ anyways. Which we know is ridiculous, right? This guy's an extremist or he's a terrorist. Like it's utter, just BS. But if we're not willing to enter that conversation and actually take a position of some sort or articulate what's going on in the community, shame on us, right? Like that's our fault that's happening. And so when Trudeau went to India and we saw what happened in the fallout of, Trudeau is he is beholden to these Khalistani terrorists, right? There's a bunch of extremists that have just taken over the Liberal Party. Utter just nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. Who was coming in defense of the community? Wasn't those politicians that were getting called these things? What they were saying was like, no, we're not, right? They weren't saying, no, first of all, that's ridiculous. The whole premise of that statement is just ridiculous. That these are people that are exercising every rights that they're entitled to. And we can get into the nitty-gritty of these conversations at some point. But what was being said was essentially like, no, Canada's very concerned about this as well. And to Harman's point again, eventually we see Sikhs just randomly being added into a Canada's Public Safety Terror Report in 2019, I think it was, even though they had no case of, anything of remotely related to Sikh violence,
especially
or terrorism,
especially as an active threat to Canadian sovereignty.
Well, yes, for decades. There was nothing quoted, nothing reported, nothing suggested, no evidence. It just didn't exist. But yet, to pacify the loud voices that have gone unchallenged, criticizing and maligning the Sikh community, they put it in. And it was
the same thing happened here with the Bloom report.
The Bloom report.
Yes, and the Bloom report is just ridiculous. And we can talk about that as well. But my point is, when this Trudeau trip happened, and I saw this, I'm like, okay, well, shame on us because we never actually try to educate anyone on this. We just silenced ourselves and censored ourselves to a certain extent. And then, shame on the politicians. But what, are politicians going to take a stance on this stuff? No, I'm not expecting them to do that. And so if we really want to change that, we got to actually start educating folks on what is actually honestly happening in the community. What are some of the honest conversations happening in the community? Again, it doesn't mean that everyone sees the same way, but everyone does agree in our community that these are real conversations we need to talk about. These aren't some fringe concepts. This is not something that's just wild that's out there. It's real internal community dialogue. I think on issues of Sikh sovereignty, there is a lot of consensus. I think on issues of Khalistan, there is a lot of consensus. But as a community, we shouldn't be afraid to talk about those things out of fear of being labeled something. The wrong here is the labeling, not us talking about it. And so my personal, again, opinion on this has been that I've been much more upfront about kind of explaining my beliefs and positions on a whole host of Sikh issues, much more publicly than maybe I was in the past. And I encourage everyone else to also not be afraid to take positions. And I understand where people will say something, well, I don't understand every minute detail of it, or I'm not comfortable talking about it, so that's fine, right? But there's a lot of folks that have a lot of gyan, like they have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of understanding, but they themselves just don't communicate out loud. Like, you know what, we're just, and that's a disservice to people that are kind of looking for, you know, quote unquote thought leadership. They're looking for some direction. They're looking for some insight. And whether that's, you know, the WSO kind of style advocacy work on a whole host of issues, or, you know, Baaz on a reporting. We've had over 100 people, about 100 people write for us in the last almost 3 years. So it'll be 3 years next month. We've had about 100 or so people write for us. Not everyone sees eye to eye.
We get a lot of issues. You know, a lot of our articles have caused some controversy. But
we've been on the brink of being canceled multiple times. So, like, the point being is, like, there's been a lot of honest like debate that's been generated from it, but we haven't been shy to like publish pieces that are very strong on Khalistan. Right? We haven't been afraid to publish pieces that have been very honest about by Amritpal Singh. Like, we haven't been shy to publish pieces that are very strong on like societal issues within the Punjabi/Sikh community. And a part of the goal of something like Baaz is, quite frankly, you know, from the lessons we've learned, that we need to actually, as a community, start talking about these things, publishing these things, creating like a written memory of these things, so that we have some reference points, but also for folks that are trying to understand the community. And there's a lot of folks outside of our community trying to understand what's going on, and a lot of them are sincere. They need to have some frame of reference, as well as what is the community actually believing or talking about. And what I've noticed is over the last 3 years, like, it's pretty crazy the kind of people that are following Baaz, right? Like from mainstream media, from government agencies, folks that you would be very surprised if I started listing, that follow it, read it, engage with it, and my hope is that it shapes the way that they report about us and talk about us moving forward. That wasn't happening before, because a lot of us were kind of censoring ourselves, and like mainstream places. You know, there's organizations out there. And the one that comes to mind, you know, sitting in the UK, is like guys like Shamsher Singh, who have been like very openly talking about this for a very long time. So that's not taking away anything from them, because there is folks that have been very unapologetic about this for a very long time. But there's a lot of other folks doing a lot of important work that you know, just need to project that and make sure they continue to project it.
Well, and so going back just a bit, you know, when we talk about what happened in Canada with this public safety report, you know, in the context of the Bloom report, the response from the community in Canada was of ekta, right? There was a lot of Bantak ekta on this issue, and because every Jathebandi really came together to denounce this, right, to hold the government accountable, to say, you know, prove these allegations or remove this section. You know, ultimately the government had to relent. But it was like, it almost took historic levels of that ekta, of people coming together and saying, we're going to denounce this, that you have no evidence. But to Jaskaran's point, we didn't minimize, you know, we didn't diminish and saying, well, no, this is a fringe movement. There are no Khalistanis, right? Like, that could have been the response from people. But that wasn't it. And like you said, the issue wasn't, that's not the issue. The issue is the labeling. The issue is them saying that this is a domestic terror threat to Canadian sovereignty, which is absolutely false, right? And so because there was people in those rooms who understood the nuance of that, you know, you see how this resolves, and the government literally has to pull that back, and you haven't seen it again, right? I think that
they literally haven't published a public safety report since that.
They just like, they literally stopped doing it.
They're like, you know what? Let's shelve this.
Yeah, like this was bad.
Yeah, let's not do this again.
But that's what it took, and it literally, you know, when all these Jathebandis came together, they went into a Gurukar in a writing that had particular political significance to say that, you know, we'll never let, you know, members of this government speak from stages. We will not let them, speak from stages of Nagar Kirtan, from our Guru Kar, but that's what it takes, right? That is the effort. And sometimes what we see in the UK, certain Gurdwara or Guru Kars who take that position, but having that ekta was so powerful, right? And where we can all agree on certain issues. And I think that was one of the really kind of catalyzing moments for the Canadian Sikh community to really come together and start to realize that, this is the type of advocacy and lobbying we need to do. Having elected officials doesn't really help.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, one of the big differences between, the UK and Canada is we've got a lot of MPs, right? ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ MP ਬਥੇਰੇ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ, right?
Dime a dozen.
Yeah, absolutely. Dime a dozen. We even got a leader, right? Jagmeet Singh, nice guy, but
This is not a knock against any of you.
it's
Continue
not,
to engage all
yes,
of you.
we like you all.
We criticize ourselves as much as we criticize anyone else.
and again, at all levels, even from like mayors to, provincial levels, lots of representation. But the question becomes, what's the most effective way, right? What is the way to actually go ahead? But, just to kind of Jaskaran's point on Baaz, there was an intentionality with the strategy he laid out, right? And it was because we saw this gap of what's happened with mainstream media. Mainstream media has, decayed in North America. Don't know what it looks like out here, but in North America, you've seen the death of the traditional mainstream media model, selling newspapers or whatever they're doing. Journalists are a lot less resource. They have a lot less time. They need places where they can get information and resources and news and understand what those issues are. And so, a huge part of the success of Baaz, some of those Bantik issues, but issues like international students. We were doing articles on international students, months before the mainstream media understood this. And it's a massive issue in Canada. You've got over 500,000 500,000?
In Canada?
Yeah. Just from Punjab?
Yeah, the number fluctuates wildly, but it's over it's at least a couple 100,000 now, I think. 200,000 now?
So think about I think it's more than that.
It's probably more than that.
I think it's like 400,000 people, like from Punjab alone.
I think it's 1 million international students now.
Total?
Yes, and then majority are from Punjab.
Yes. So think about that in the country of 30,
Something like that.
6 million
Or the
people.
plan is to get 1 million. Sorry, we're confusing the numbers. The point being, it's a large number.
40 million. I've been
Hey,
corrected.
research man, just pull that up over.
Yeah, we've got our
we have your research desk over there. Pull it up. Pull it up.
Dr. Saab in the corner.
Joe
who's-
Rogan podcast.
Jamie, pull it up.
I don't want to misinform folks that there's 1 million Punjabi students in Canada. Oh my God.
No, I think they're
It's a large number though.
they're everywhere, and they're every small little town, every
There's
single
loads
little
of
college.
Punjabi students here now as well.
Yeah.
Even in
But
London.
massive thing in the mainstream media really didn't understand this issue, and it kind of went under the radar because they assume an international student is somebody is like going and doing their master's or their PhD somewhere. But now it's a total different kind of situation and context. But Baaz was leading the charge on that, and mainstream journalists came to us to get that information, contacts.
Yeah.
Hey, who gave us this information? We want to do stories. That's some of the most powerful parts of what Baaz has, right? Is really being a source and a trusted source for journalists in Canada. And I think that was a huge part of it, but it came out of that, those meetings that we had across Canada with editorial teams, right? We went to meet the editorial teams of all the major news dailies with all of the, with our CBC, the BBC equivalent in Canada, right? And going and doing just going to put a slideshow together, very corporate and really demonstrate the problematic coverage that they had. You go there and you show them, here's how you're wrong.
Yeah.
You literally have no idea what you're talking
Here's 10
about.
headlines.
And
By the end, they're like, oh, shit.
3.4.
So 340,000.
You don't have a mic, so nobody can hear you. So
You can hear the voice in the background. It's like a radio show where it's like, hey, what's going on? You have the voice in the background?
yeah.
So 340,000, give or take, Punjabi students. Yeah.
Yeah, so closer to my number.
Basically, Sikhi has huge funding. They got a research guy in the back.
Yeah. I got to do a whole team. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
They're gonna have like the sound effects like, no, yeah, so we have like 340, so whatever. There's a couple 100,000. That number, it's growing, mind you, right?
It was
So-
closer to his number.
Yes, thank you.
I said 100, 200.
I'm factual.
Hold on for a second. No, just wait 1 second.
There's real reporting, there's factual reporting,
hold
there's
on.
opinion.
Hold on.
Right?
Hold on. Boss fact check. He said 1 million.
No,
Okay.
No,
I did not say a million.
You said 1 million. Okay. All right.
And again, those are like China, but the proportion that's from Punjab, and again, because it's a great way to immigrate to Canada, right? Canada, student visa le lo.
And we know Canada is the greatest country on earth. And the
one thing Canada has right over UK is that we solved the immigrant issue. We love immigrants. Conservatives need immigrants, right? Every party there accepts कि बंदे चाहिए हैं, होर बंदे चाहिए हैं. That's the only way our country's economic development happens is by continuing immigration. So this is one thing that we've actually solved. But because of our housing issues, we've kind of screwed up. You know, housing is really, like, it shocks me that a house in London costs the same as Brampton. Like, Brampton's
Brampton's a great city.
Brampton's not even in Toronto. Right? It's like saying that you live in Wolverhampton, or saying you live in London, but you live in Wolverhampton.
Toronto is in the
Not even
greater
the
Brampton area. So Toronto is the commercial suburb of Brampton.
Brampton de vich kakh nahi hega. Like, there's nothing there. There's like, the tallest building is like 3 stories.
Our highway has like 10 lanes. Well, yes. No. It's just we have Sheridan Plaza.
Yeah, Sheridan Back Plaza, great gana by Ali Mangar.
We have
who's been targeted recently.
Yes. With Sidhu Moosewala came out of Brampton. I can go on. Let's go on.
Because it's desperation. Where's the best music created? It's out of places of desperation, right? You have to find that silver lining, which is where
it's a place that nurtures its people.
So Moosewala started from the bottom, started in Brampton, but again, it's, you know, when we're
totally sidetracked here. I don't know what we're talking about. Okay, so no, you were talking about the editorial board meetings.
Yes.
Which I think was an important topic.
It's a topic that we never talk about.
Yeah, we should.
We've never talked about, you know, how we went about dealing with Canadian media. Because right now, in the aftermath of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, you saw Jaskaran, you know, from Canada on CNN, on BBC, in mainstream Canadian news.
Keep pumping my tires a little bit.
Yeah, but
just keep going on that. Just roll with that thought.
That is a 6-year process or more.
Yeah, like that. That's not Yeah, if we rewind back to like the Trudeau trip. The Trudeau trip is at least from the Canadian context, like I think a watershed moment.
That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
Before you dismissed, you know,
you just mentioned it out of order, right? So I have to pull it back like out again to like make this like seem logical. The Trudeau trip was a watershed moment for Canadian Sikhs, right? And I think a lot changed within the like Sikh advocacy space after the Trudeau trip. One was, again, Harman kind of mentioned this in his like just unhinged kind of rants that just hop all over the place. And again, just direct questions here and just let him kind of chime in. Don't let him run with it. Just check him, okay? Don't be shy. And so I'm just joking.
No, you just don't even know what you're going to say. You've lost your point and train of thought. And so you can just summarize what I said. That's totally fine.
Me buying time?
Yeah, I can jump in.
No. I got it. Just give me a second. No, so what happened after the Trudeau? So what happened before the Trudeau trip? I think that's important to understand. Well, what was the state of affairs in the Canadian Sikh community? After the 2015 federal election,
that's right,
when the Liberal Party came in and formed a majority government, there were over a dozen Sikh MPs elected. I think the total number kind of leveled out at about 17 Sikh MPs in total, like across parties. And of the ministers, 4 were Sikh. In major ministries, right? You had
defense.
We had infrastructure, transportation.
Yeah,
yeah, and then we had
economic
development, which was a large portfolio under the Liberal government at that time. And then Bardish was like the House leader. She had a meaningful role in the cabinet as well. And so I remember I went to Vasaki on the Hill. Like it happened shortly after the cabinet was formed, the government kind of started functioning. And this is just it's exactly what it sounds like. The Hill is Parliament Hill. They had a Vasaki program there, and I remember being there and just like the kind of attitude of the Sikh community that showed up to this was, we made it. We're done. Like this is it. Like we hit peak. We're made it. We're like part and parcel of the Canadian fabric. We're never gonna have an issue again. Like that was a sentiment amongst the community like that. And I remember
it's like how you felt when Diljit did his like concert tour
at Coachella. I was like, we can't do more than this,
right? Like we made it.
We made it as a people. There. As a people.
Yes.
This solved all our issues as a quorum. The sentiment was like, okay, like what more do you want? Like this is it. We're never gonna have an issue in this country again. Like it's amazing. And I remember like half jokingly, talking to folks like Harman and others. I'm like, WSO's whole job was to like make sure we protect and promote the interests of the Sikh people in Canada. Is this an existential crisis? So it's like as an organization, like you as an organization, you want to get to a point where it's like you're not needed anymore, right? And so I remember like half joking these conversations. I mean, obviously we know that there's a lot of accommodation issues. There's a lot of issues, and we can talk about that after as well. But at that juncture in time, it was like, man, this is crazy. And I remember Visakan Hill visibly, like just the smiles, the energy was just, you couldn't explain it. And you fast forward. No, even before you fast forward, there's this famous quote Trudeau says at a press conference afterwards, and he's like, "I have more Sikhs in my cabinet than Modi does." And in hindsight, looking back at that, that was the equivalent of when Obama at the White House press gala got up and made fun of Trump. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And Trump was like, at that point, I knew I was going to run for president and beat Obama.
Beat him.
Like that was I almost feel like that was the equivalent. Modi was like, you know what? We got to put the Sikhs in their place. Like, if they build like a home base in Canada, like obviously the Sikhs are going to raise their concerns about what's happening to the brothers and sisters in Punjab. Obviously, we're going to keep advocating on various human rights issues, the outstanding justice related to the 1984 Sikh genocide and Sikh sovereignty. Right, which is connected to Khalistan. And I partly feel that at that moment when Trudeau said that comment, that's when the wheels started really churning. Like, how do we undermine this entire community? And again, that's not going to push aside all the nasty stuff India has been doing for a very long time in Canada and the diaspora communities. But that was kind of a moment that you can kind of like, point to. Fast forward to the trip to India, Trudeau makes this huge trip, gets absolutely destroyed, in India. The community gets maligned. In February alone of that year when that trip happened, this was in around the time, Gurjeevan Singh, who was at the time with Sikh Youth Federation, which I'm sure you guys are kind of aware, did this great Facebook post. This is when Facebook was still a thing, and listed, 150 articles from February alone, and this was like 2 weeks into February, that were just directly maligning the Sikh community in Canadian press. And quickly we realized, no, we didn't make it. Just electing MPs is not some magical solution. And in fact, it was with our MPs sitting there that they signed the security sharing framework, that they allowed the Sikh community to be maligned, that they didn't challenge it publicly, that they put themselves in a position where Hardeep Sajjan like literally had to go to Captain Arvinder Singh, like apologize.
And Captain called him. Go back 1 second. Captain Arvinder Singh up until that point had been calling Hardeep Sajjan
a Khalistan terrorist,
a Khalistan terrorist, an extremist. Yeah, and Sajjan had to go and sit there in a meeting with Captain, as Captain gave him names and said, "Here are the people in Canada. You need to go do something about these guys." This is what the Minister of Defense of Canada did, right? Rather than standing up for his own community.
And I think there was like a frustration of sorts, and like within Sajjan as well. Like there's some media clips where he's like, "What more can I do to explain to you? Like this is not a problem." But at the end of the day, the community was thrown under the bus. The short and simple is thrown under the bus. We're gonna talk about that trip like 8 hours, but short and simple, community was thrown under the bus. We quickly realized, no, we didn't make it. Yeah. We were quickly othered, like instantly. The moment you're up against a challenge. The government was very quick to kind of turn its back on its people. And we realized that you can't replace strong third-party advocacy. Like that has to happen consistently and always. I think we quickly realized that Gurdwaras have a role to play in advocacy. And what's an important concept within like the Sikh identity and thinking is you can't separate, the spiritual from the political and social in Sikh, right? Like you have to constantly work on like that holistically. There's no like duality between these two separate things. It's not a separation of church and state. Like that's not our thinking. And so our mission doesn't end. And so that was made very evident to us after the Trudeau trip. So when we talk about like the successes that kind of happened the last 5-ish years, the ICTA and the community is, obviously it's not a utopia. There's issues that come up that not everyone agrees with. I can say, though, pretty consistently over the last 5 years, Sikh orgs like the WSO and major Sikh Gurdwara associations like OGC or BCGC have worked very well with one another on issues that are very important to the community as a whole. And no, there might be different opinions on a lot of different things, but like the big ticket issues have been pretty unified across the board, including like the public safety terror report response, which came as a result of the India trip. The media relations. We realize that the media has no idea who we are. They still don't know. And, institutional kind of journalists are, as someone who's kind of spent a lot of time in that space, or just like all human beings, very lazy, right? Like they're gonna, they got a story, they got a deadline. Something crazy just happened with the Sikh community in India. I got to put a story out in the next 2 hours. Am I going to call Harman or Jaskaran? I don't even know these guys. I've never met them, never talked to them. I don't know who they are. I'm going to call up Ujjwal Dosanjh, right?
Very problematic figure in Canadian context.
And, former premier of BC, not practicing Sikh, doesn't describe himself as one, who gives very terrible takes. Okay, we're going to call Terry Molesky. Everyone kind of knows who Terry Molesky is. We're going to call him to give his input as an expert on the Sikh community. Like these were the people that they're resorting to in those 150 articles that Gurjeevan kind of labeled and pulled out during Trudeau's trip. And so we quickly realized we have, the onus is on us to a certain extent. Like we can't just trust the journalists to do their job. We have a job to do as well. And so instead of being passive and just kind of waiting, we got very aggressive in our outreach. That's where the editorial board meetings happened with the major media outlets. We took in slideshows like, here's everything you guys did wrong. But here are our solutions to all those things. Build up a rapport with these folks to where we are today.
How did you get that meeting with these editorials?
Well, so when things kind of went crazy, I'm very I casually swear quite a bit, but I am containing myself.
You're doing very good.
Yes, we're in a Gurdwara as well.
You got to swear in?
I just heard the word. I don't know if you count shit as a swear word.
I don't know. I don't know what the UK standards on swearing.
That's just my standards.
But so far this kind of sounds like an infomercial for Sikh PA.
Yes.
Like you're kind of making the case for how important organizations like Sikh PA are.
Sikh PA is an incredibly important organization, which is why we love working with Jasveer Singh.
Shout out Jasveer Singh. Shout out.
I love Jasveer Singh. You're a brother. And you kind of look like me too. So.
I was thinking that one. I swear it's like you, not just me.
What do they look alike?
We all look the same. We all look the same.
You two don't look alike.
No, I'm far better looking. I'm far better looking.
Like if you're gonna go good, you might as well tie the style, right?
I know. I'm ashamed. I don't know what to say. I'm ashamed. So and I'm sorry if I'm ranting here. Cut me off if you need to. I don't want to pull a Harman. I'm only saying this. I'm projecting because usually I'm the one who rants. So the reality is. When things kind of went crazy, we started this whole the self-censorship thing. I'll tell from a personal perspective. I was like, I can't just be a spectator to this. That's when I first got into Twitter, was in and around that time. And I knew the power of Twitter just from public affairs work that I spent some time in. Okay, you got to start directly challenging these journalists. Like they're wrong. Like they're factually wrong, patently false. You have to start challenging them. Politicians are giving these watered down, just lame responses to these issues. They're not defending us. Okay, well, we got to challenge them. Even the ones that are from our community, that are, some that were quite frankly gatekeeping, right? They're more concerned about consolidating their power within a party structure than the fallout that the community was facing. This is one of the big failings of party politics, the Westminster system of the UK and Canada both kind of operate under. This is the big failing of party systems. Okay, well, we got to I can't write an email and expect that to be forwarded to Prime Minister Trudeau to share our thoughts. I'm just going to challenge them right there, right? And everyone kind of started doing this, and this is where the Ask Canadian Sikhs campaign started. So that came as a result of what was transpiring in India at the time, and continued onwards, where we encouraged folks to speak out. And we didn't gatekeep what they were saying. It was social media. We're just speak, just say something. And that went viral within Canada. There was a lot of mainstream reporting within Canada about that. We wrote op-eds. We got op-eds in. We started calling in favors and calling anyone we knew that had a connection somewhere, right? You kind of started doing this project of list making. Really, it's basic. It's opening up an Excel sheet. It started like writing out information. Who knows who? And eventually ends with editorial board meetings. And like WSO like has a name. It is a brand within Canada. People do know it exists. But kind of diversifying the thoughts of availability of folks that can give comments. Then the editorial board meetings happen. We go and we have like a real conversation. There was one bizarre one. I won't get into like nitty gritty detail. It was a bizarre editorial meeting. I don't know if Harman was there or not. This was in Vancouver. And Balpreet Singh was there. It was me, Balpreet Singh. There was another individual. It's just fuzzy in my mind who it was. It was a major outlet that has a problematic history reporting on the Sikhs. It's probably one of like the hotbeds of like problematic reporting. And we have a fairly positive editorial meeting. And one of the journalists there was one who had constant, like, was just really terrible reporting on Sikhs. They happened to be in that meeting as well. And we're kind of going through our thing. And this reporter stops, looks at me, he stops the conversation we're having, the presentation, looks at me, points at me, and says, you intimidate me, and you intimidate other reporters. I'm like, sir, I just fact checked you guys, right? And he's like, no, on Twitter you were like very intimidating. I'm okay. I'm like, show me where I was intimidating. I will seriously apologize to you right now in front of your editors and let them know that you're not like a terrible human being, or like I'm not here, I will like trying to like beat you up or something. I'm like, show me, and I will immediately apologize. Couldn't find it.
This is like a senior.
This is a senior journalist
who considers himself an expert.
Yes, on the Sikh community.
On the Sikh community.
He's like, and I talked to other journalists, and they also said, yeah, that Jaskaran guy's intimidating. I'm like, look, and I pulled out like the actual conversations that I've had. I'm like, look, this is what I said to you. Like, what's wrong with this? Got to the point where the editors in the room were told him, like, yeah, you know what? Like, just temper down. Please continue. We actually were appreciating what you guys are saying. Like that wasn't like that's what. Like, imagine what's happening behind with us not there in newsrooms. Like what they're saying to one another. Like, that was such a bizarre experience. I remember walking out, and Balpreet Singh was just like, "What was that?" Like this was such a bizarre experience. But that's the power of doing that.
But the power of the experience was also so many young journalists, when people were speaking out, were so encouraged with people attacking the legacy media journalists.
Yes.
Right?
They don't like them either.
They didn't like them either. And they were working in the same newsrooms, and they're like, okay, thank you for doing my job for me. Right? That helped facilitate those conversations. Because you had people, and you had young people in journalism who just needed a space to be able to have a voice, and we created that space for them. Right? They were able to fill that gap when you went and demonstrated to mainstream media that you don't know what you're talking about. This is why you're failing. Right? Like ethnic language media is outstandingly robust, as a platform, and yet here you guys are with all these resources. Why are you failing? Because you don't know the genuine story. You don't actually have the details. You don't have the nuance. You're missing it, right? Which is why we don't engage with your sources. That is your problem, and it started with media critiques and organizations that do media critique. Like before the editorial meetings, Jaskaran had been on certain journalistic media podcasts, right? And going there where that was a source for young journalists to like hear a different perspective and understand, like, look, there's a gap we have, right? There is this place. And I think that really helped drive that conversation and help change that. Because again, all of a sudden you saw 4 or 5 voices who were all old, outdated, right? Who were all kind of, and nobody liked them anyways.
And then the choice of lazy journalists, like lazy legacy journalists who just kept going back to pull water from the same well. But yeah, continue.
No, I mean, that was my point, is that helped facilitate those conversations, right? And that's what made those editorial meetings so successful. Because you had journalists in that room saying, this is what I'd rather be doing. I'd rather be talking to them. And our pitch wasn't, you only talk to us, right? The pitch is, okay, you want to have the pro-India person, just make sure we're there and there to have a comment as well, right? Yeah. And just have the balance. And again, not to say that balance is perfect, right? Because, we know that, 95% of the Sikh community has a certain perspective. Well, giving the voice to the, you know, the small little minority is not necessarily balanced. But what it did was it gave them, you know, the assurance that, look, there is some impartiality in how we're going to deal with this, but they just came to enjoy working with people that they felt like were being more open and giving them the context and giving them the background, right? And that's the really important part, I think, when dealing with media is, you know, them building that trust in you, right? And seeing that work and seeing that demonstrated history.
Rather than us outright attacking them and then them feeling like ostracized, like, oh, forget these guys, they just go off.
Well, it's like...
I did attack people.
Yeah.
he attacked them.
But attacking, like, I challenged something like Terry Molesky and I have had very historic battles.
He's blocked out all of us.
He hasn't blocked me. But at this point, Terry Molesky is irrelevant. He is. He's actually, we're the only ones who give him air. Like, he's completely irrelevant. But yeah, there was a time where he was a problematic journalist who was a bad faith actor. You can't negotiate with a man like that, right? So you're better off just criticizing their work in a public forum and forcing them under like the microscope of scrutiny. Like, that is a very effective tool. Then there's journalists who, you know, are sincere, don't know any better, don't know the community, were led to the same tired sources that are disconnected from the community grassroots. Is that the journalist's fault, or was that just they just didn't have enough bridges into the community, didn't know who to go to, went to the old legacy farts who just told them to go to the same old people, and they generated a product that just wasn't worthy of print, but here we are. I think it's being able to know the difference between who's a bad faith actor and who's a good faith actor who made a mistake. And so if it's the latter, that you shouldn't be attacking them. You know, you can still ask them. You can still ask them publicly too. Look, their product isn't public, so the critique should be in public as well. Quite frankly, it's not like they said something in a private room and I blasted it publicly. But when it's something that's been printed and it's been exposed to millions, and it forms a kind of a historical archive as well, right? That people are going to quote back to. That's the bigger problem, actually, is that it becomes something that people just keep quoting back to. Okay, well, that needs to be addressed. And, you know, the editorial meetings, for example, were good faith meetings. We didn't come in and like attack editorial boards. Look, you guys, our assumption, we're running on the assumption that you just didn't know any better. So let us educate you. If you continue to do this, well, now I can say with a straight face that the problem is you just don't care, right? And I can say with some level of, we're like, well, like a pretty decent level of confidence in the Canadian media perspective, at least, that ever since the Trudeau trip to India and the terrible reporting that was leveled against our community, it's gotten infinitely better. And that's not just because they talk to me, right? Like they to Harvey's point, like we tell them open, they talk to anyone you want. I have journalists reaching out to me like on a weekly basis, like, hey, like, especially when something's like hot, like the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, which I'm sure we'll get to, that, you know, we're trying to look for voices. And I have, like myself, have offered, like, look, you've already talked to me like 3 times. I don't want to be a victim of the same issues, like the young buck who's going to, you know, that's 15 years younger than me is going to be like, Jaskaran again? The guy doesn't even tie a pug. Like, there's people that are smart, right? There's people that are smart, that are articulate, that deserve opportunities to speak. Let me put you in touch with them. Now, whether or not that happens or not, at that point, it's not in my hands. But we make a point of, like, let's not repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. Like, there's a lot of good that our ancestors did. There's some that they could have done better. Let's make sure that we're continuously refreshing our pool of talent. We have succession planning. We have other folks that we can bring to the table that have great opinions, and make them feel like they're part of this dialogue. Like, that's one great outcome of our work, and that we didn't just burn every bridge. Now, like, yeah, the Terry Moleskys of the world are never going to work with us. Just never will. There's 2 or 3 journalists like that. They look at us in an adversarial light, and quite frankly, and to be honest, we look at them in an adversarial light. I'm just not going to work with them. Now, you know, if we fast forward from the Terry Molesky report and we look at like recent incidents, by Amritpal Singh's the crackdown, Canadian media reporting on that was phenomenal. Right? Again, in most cases, obviously there's exceptions. You know, people are going to reply to the comments, well, there was this one article that really sucks, so Jaskaran doesn't know what he's talking about. No, I'm just doing broad strokes for the purpose of this conversation. There are obviously always exceptions. But for the most part, Canadian media was very good by Amritpal Singh. On the farmers' protest. Right? That was, the farmers' protest was the next thing after the Trudeau, the next big thing. Canadian media was phenomenal on the farmers' protest. They did a great job. On the recent assassination, and we can get into like a little more detail there, Canadian media has been by and large good. It's a complex topic, but they've been pretty good on it. The problem now is not so much like media, it's like these, and Canada, in this instance, it's like far-right talking heads who just exist in like social media spaces who are deeply problematic and quite frankly like spreading falsehoods. That seems to be a growing phenomenon that needs to be challenged. Folks are just grifting off like Indian views and getting like called into Indian shows. Like they're Cherry Moleskis, but younger.
Are these bots or are these actual people, though?
These are like, I'm talking about like Gore, like just
Okay.
right-wing speakers or like talking heads and like far-right talking heads that exist in like Canadian spaces or that are speaking about this issue from a very pro-India perspective and like grifting off that. Like, and their target is not like, they actually don't really care about India. Their target is Justin Trudeau. They don't like Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, it's a political issue.
Yes.
It's not a factual issue.
Yes.
I just want to say last piece on the journalism. What helps you with journalists is the credibility. When everything you've been saying
Pans out.
Right? When you actually see and say, well, okay, for how many years has WSO been talking about Indian interference? Right? How long have we been saying that Modi is a genocidal dictator? Right? How long have we said that they want to, suppress dissent and they want, they target activists and they go after, when you speak from an actual community perspective, that's like, you're right. We all know that agents exist in community. We all know surveillance happens. We know that targeting was happening. And eventually when all of these things start to fall into place, that's where I think you tie in the Kisaan Morcha, which is, we've been saying that they don't believe in free speech. We've been saying that this is a country that is oppressive and repressive. And, how many social media blackouts did you have around the farmers' protest, right? And that, I think, was the most powerful piece. Immediately after Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination, right? Like, I remember your piece, Jaskaran, saying that this is an unprecedented move where we've seen, Sikhs in the diaspora being targeted and killed. That was unprecedented. Like, nobody in the community was unafraid to say that this was the Indian government. Like, we know who it is. It is who it is. And that was...
Sorry, just on this, on when Nijjar Shahidi happened, what was your guys' response at the time? Like, can you talk us through, like, you went into emergency response mode, and then what was your thought processes?
Well, I think, first of all, like, when you watch the response literally was, after you've seen the video of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, in the Gurukar before his Shahidi, it's such a powerful speech, right? It's so powerful, his words of defiance, right? Knowing the threat that existed to his life, acknowledging that threat, from stage, speaking about this and speaking about how he still, in spite of that, was going to continue to speak out on sovereignty, to speak out on Khalistan, to speak out against, the oppression that happens, is so powerful, right? And it gives us a good reminder and it gives us a good direction of where we need to go as a calm. But from our perspective, it was unprecedented, right? This was something that no one had seen before. We knew the interference that existed at different levels, right? We've seen it in such petty ways, right? Jaskaran, knows very well when, like, it's the High Commissioner in India, the Indian High Commissioner in Canada, will write letters to local politicians that, okay, if at a cultural event, people want to have a separate Punjab tent from an India tent, that's a problem for them, right? And they'll write to local politicians saying, no, they have to be the India tent. Like, thonu ki hai, like, that's jo marji karna, right? Like, Punjab, like, thonu ki hai, right? Like, again, I think we need to stop calling our food Indian food, please, right? Punjabi food, like, okay? Stop eating rasgulle. I just found out today they're Bengali. I never liked them. Now I know why I don't like them. Because they're not authentic.
Only eat barfi, nothing else.
Nothing else. Only besan.
Yeah, it's only
right?
besan. As Doaba guys,
Look,
yes, only besan.
It's Punjabi food. Stop calling it Indian food, right? Be proud of what is specifically ours.
Yes.
Yes. But, and again, we're not South Asian either. This label is very, very probably
That's lateral discrimination.
Lateral
That's the erasure of the Punjabi identity.
We used to be called East Indians, then it was Indo-Canadian, and now in Canada it's South Asian.
No, it started with Hindus with DOO, which is how the Ferengis said it. Then it became East Indians.
East Indians, yeah.
Then it became Indo-Canadians.
Yeah.
Now South Asian. They're saying everything but Punjabi and Sikh.
Yes.
Which is like 90% of like what they're trying to reference when they use these words.
Absolutely. They're literally talking about Sikhs, and they're like, they want to use any other term.
Yeah,
Because
sick.
and we do it to ourselves. How many South Asian, orgs are there, right?
Yeah.
But
But we want to be inclusive. Yes, there's times where using the term South Asian is appropriate.
when?
When you're talking about the continent of like South Asia.
Yeah, that's a continent. There's no Punjabi for the word South Asian. That shows you everything you need to know. Like, what are you going to call South Asian? That
doesn't exist in our language.
It doesn't
Therefore,
exist.
it shouldn't exist in our mind.
That's right.
Because we can't add new words to a language. That's not allowed.
So the interference was so petty in so many spaces, but it is more nefarious, right? Where you have efforts to have, Sikh studies in universities, the Indian government is funding professors to teach Indian studies, and Sikhi is part of that, right? Like that propaganda, that level of, how they're using their resources to change, the discourse and narratives, and how to then now, be the ones who are going to be leading the conversation with our children. We see at WSO, we did international student orientation sessions. ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਕੌਣ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ? Consulate, right? ਜਿੱਥੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹਫਤਾ ਬਾਅਦ 2 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆਓ, right? ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਨਾ ਜਾਓ, right? Don't go to the Sikh orgs, right? ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆਓ, ਤੁਸੀਂ Indian ਆ, right? We're here to protect you guys, right? And like that was a level of interference, but we know it was political and all that. For them to operate in these countries, obviously there was a succession of it, right? It starts in Pakistan, then it came here with Kanda, and then it goes to Canada, right? And it's our obligation to speak out about these things unapologetically. So coming back to your point and question, what do we do? Well, we'd already seen, right, 2 situations before, right? Like, because the Kanda stuff was just kind of starting to like, hey, there's circumstances around this, something is not right here, right? So when by Hardeep Singh Nijjar Shahidi, immediately this is Indian government. We know, in the heart of hearts, we know exactly where this is coming from. And I think our response was, we know exactly where this is coming from. We want investigations. We're not going to accept, because right before it happened, and you go back, you can look at this, Indian media was already spinning. They already reported he was dead before. Like they telegraphed it, like we talked about before. Yeah. They telegraphed these things, right? First, the media stories were talking about the Khalistani gang nexus, right? Khalistanis are involved with gangs, right? That's why they're involved in all these drugs and all this kind of stuff. When we know there's no such nexus, it just does not exist. There's no overlap, right? None of these gangsters are going to say, yeah, asi bhi Khalistani hai. Like it's not right? It's not a thing. But seeing those stories in the Indian media first, before Canadian media even acknowledged who was killed, right? Again, you saw it, and we've seen it so many times, right?
America as well.
Sorry?
America? What happened in America?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, they announced, if you remember, America media announced that Pandu was assassinated, right? And it turned out to be fake news. He wasn't assassinated.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, and that was like Baaz broke that, like, he's not assassinated. We just confirmed, but they telegraphed that at some point. By Hardeep Singh Nijjar, they telegraphed like he was a most wanted, and there's like wild fake stories that have been attached to Hardeep Singh Nijjar, like that he was running a terrorist training camp in British Columbia. It's like, that is just not true. And RCMP confirmed it wasn't true. But India still reports, they still report that to this day. Well, here's a video of him. The video is not of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. It's some random guy shooting guns. What you're allowed to do in Canada anyways, right? If you have...
You would very tell it's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. Like, even a Mona 12, that they did not do the same things. You're a different bande. So, like, India is like, they're telegraphing this anyways. And I think the NIA had just released a list, like, here's our top targets. Like, I think it might be blending different examples, but the point being that this was all telegraphed. So when Bhai Hardeep Singh was assassinated, we also knew, because we're connected at the grassroots, we're part of the community, that Bhai Hardeep Singh was going on radio that same time sharing that I am a target. I have been warned by CSIS, which is our intelligence agency. I guess what MI6 is the equivalent of James Bond is the equivalent here in the UK. So, like our CIA equivalent is CSIS. So, CSIS, RCMP, which is like the federal police force, has been warning me that there's targets on me, and I believe it's India. Like, these are things that Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar himself was talking about shortly before he was killed. We also know about Ripudaman Malik's murder a couple of months before that, which also was done at the I'm just going to say it, I'm pretty sure it was done by the Indian government as well, at the behest of the Indian government and committed by local gangs that were hired by the Indian government. We now know in hindsight that is what they were planning to do with Bandhu and Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar. In Nijjar's case too, it's our understanding that it was gangs hired by the Indian government. It's to Harman's point, there's no Khalistan criminal nexus. It's Indian government criminal gang is the actual nexus. That's so talking about projecting, which there's been a lot of here today. We're talking about projecting. India was projecting what they're literally doing, trying to say that there's a nexus here between Canada, Khalistanis, drugs, I can't remember half the stuff they say, criminal gangs, trafficking. There's this nexus that exists. It's literally India doing all of that. It's not, this doesn't exist. It's not a real thing.
Because they want to show a rivalry, right? These are people dying.
They're dying. It's internal fights over drugs and trafficking between Khalistanis, which is just BS. Like, that's not what's happening here. And so it's what India is doing. India is literally using these gangs to kill Khalistanis, essentially, is what's happening here. And threatening like other Sikh activists of like different types or ilk.
Well, and there was a Naujawan who died in Winnipeg, I think a few weeks or days after Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden the Indian media goes, "Oh, Khalistan, another Khalistani," right? And he had no
also story that India broke hours before police and Canadian authorities like confirmed. So you gotta start asking questions like, what's going on, right? So again, in Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's situation, he gets killed. We have our suspicions of the Malik killing. We still have those suspicions. We obviously saw what happened with Kanda, what's going on there. We've seen incidents in Pakistan. Like, this is all kind of happening at the same time. We know Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar himself, what he was going through. We knew, again, because our ears are to the ground, we're connected to the community, that CSIS and RCMP are making visits, giving due to warrants. The one similarity between everyone that was getting a due to warrant at that time was that they were all Sikh activists. Yeah. They were not committed, they're not engaged in anything else, right? That was one similarity they all share. When they come do these due to warrants, CSIS and RCMP, they're not telling you who's trying to kill you. Yeah, like, they're not necessarily giving that information up front. They're just saying, hey, there's a threat in your life, and we're investigating it, but FYI, just be more vigilant. And so we were 100% sure the moment it happened that this was the Indian government. They probably hired a gang to do it. That was our immediate instincts on this. I remember talking to folks within government almost immediately, as well as journalists, mainstream journalists, like, hey, FYI, this is what's happening right now. This is the community's opinion on it. Before you write or say anything on it, just double check with bodies like the WSO and others, so that we can make sure whatever you put out first is factually correct, or not too deeply steeped into like speculations and allegations, right? Like we could shore up a lot of these facts, if not everything. And we still, like, there's a lot out there that we're looking at the tip of the iceberg. That's all I'm going to say. Like, the pipeline, there's a lot coming through. That just going to make this story even more wild. But I think ensuring that we were able to quickly respond to, and this is the power again of advocacy organizations. This wasn't government officials doing it. Government officials were telling me at first, well, we don't know who did it. We don't know who did it. And I'm like, no, like, we know who did it. Make sure you double check before you say something that is contrary to what I'm telling you. Yeah. Media folks too. Like, if you're going to report on this, don't report on it on the basis of like India media reporting on some nexus. This is not what's happening here. And it gets just as a general advice to folks, like, in whether it's the UK or the US, Canada, Australia, wherever our Sikh kind of population is growing or is already established, controlling the story at first instance is critical, right? You want to be one of the first people on that story to talk about it, to ensure that they're not talking about ABC when they should be talking about, XYZ, right? So you want to make sure that you're standing there and folks that are going to be reporting on something are directed in the right direction, in good faith, so that they're not generating content that then is going to take days to be corrected, right? And most people, they're going to read an issue for the in the first instance, they're going to read it one time, and they're going to make up their opinion on that issue as a whole, no matter what updates come later, right?
Yeah.
And so, which is why it's so important to get the first story out. And then as this was going on, Harman and I, and there's another friend of ours that's involved with Baaz, Darshan. We knew right away that Baaz has to have an opinion on this. Like, we have to have a position on this. We've got to start reporting on this. And what we know we've got to put it out. And mainstream journalists obviously are following Baaz. And so then that was shaping their consensus on, okay, this is the community's position on this. We got to take this in consideration before we start talking about this issue. So that was our initial reaction out of this. It was our same reaction out of for Pannu, in the Khanda situation, same thing. Like, this is the community's feeling on it. Because if you don't let the government and decision makers know that we're watching, you risk having on one end, like the Khanda situation, where the potentially cover up, right? There's a just very haphazard, kind of lazy investigation at best, maybe at worst, a cover up on a killing which makes no sense. At least at face value, and we have a doctor in the room, we could talk to him after, but at least at face value, it just doesn't add up. Where we know we've seen Russian style assassinations in the past in the UK. We've literally seen it here. Like the Russian example, I don't think the UK government made much noise of it at the time as well, because they're trying to appease Putin at the time. And that went horribly wrong. Now they're trying to appease Modi, also going to go horribly wrong. The reality is you had a situation where if we don't come out strongly and have those built relationships, which we fostered 5 years ago, it's hard to kind of like insert an honest analysis from a Sikh perspective on a Sikh story. And so that's how we responded to what happened by Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
So if you were to summarize like a blueprint, right, for a Sikh advocacy group or any journalist in the UK, what's the step-by-step process?
I think on first things first, electing more MPs won't necessarily solve the community's problems. And this is not a knock on current MPs. You guys have some good MPs here. It's not a knock on politicians. It's not a knock on people who are trying to aspire to be a politician. I ran for municipal council, lost because of Diwali. The election was on the same day as Diwali. This is my pity. Like, please, sure. This is why. Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I lost twice.
He's lost twice.
So he's I got no excuses.
He's double the failure.
The common denominator is just going to help.
Yes,
those campaigns.
Wherever I go, something has to be said about that.
Just going on that piece, is there research to support that?
There is research. There's actually research. It was done by a UK school. I don't remember. I think it was LSE.
Did you read it? Or
I did read it. It's not a false memory. I know I 100%.
I read it.
You read it as well,
but I don't remember where I read it.
I'm pretty sure it was LSE because I found it after. But they actually researched specifically on the question of looking at the kind of diaspora communities in the UK, and this is true about Canada, US, like similar kind of communities. That is it worthwhile for communities to invest more in trying to get more MPs elected, to ensure that their voices are heard in Parliament on policy issues or studies or whatever, committees at the government level? Or is it better to just invest more into third-party advocacy groups, right? So think of like the World Sikh Organization, right? That does like government relations side advocacy work. And what they found is one of the problems with political parties in the UK and Canada in particular, the American system is completely different. You can't. It's a completely different system. But Canada and US at least, Canada and UK is the same system. What the problem is when you elect officials is they operate in the parameters of party politics, right? And so what they're gunning for is party favors. They're gunning for being appointed to cabinet. They're gunning for portfolios, and the system is one in which that rewards hard loyalty to the party line, right? It doesn't award like unique and new perspectives necessarily, or it's very bureaucratic to kind of get that process going. And so when MPs get elected from communities like ours, they once they're inside, regardless of their intentions, a lot of them have great intentions.
Absolutely.
It's just that when they get in, they're confined by this system. And then what not good MPs do is they start gatekeeping the community out to control inputs in so that they can show the party that they're the ones in charge. And if folks in the community are saying something that's opposed to what they've already told, perhaps, or they want to tell within the party, they will block those voices out. And what this research found was that if you have very strong advocacy groups, that have resources, that have funding, that have the means to engage in government relations and stakeholder engagement and media relations, those organizations can do just as good a job of ensuring, in fact, better job of ensuring community voices are heard if the MP is not even from their community, right? So I'll just get the typical example. You have a white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. We're in UK, so that actually is more relevant to say that. You go to some of the your mainstream UK white background MP who has no idea about these issues, but he's a good MP. He's willing to listen. There's bad MPs from all communities. Let me just make that clear. But this is someone who's a good MP. He wants to listen. He wants to listen to his constituency. He cares about that. The community has some issues. I want to hear about them. And you come to him as, let's say, basic of Sikh. He comes to them and comes with self-help Gurdwara and comes with whatever large UK Sikh organizations. They kind of come together and they bring forward a report regarding the Bloom report or something, right? Or regarding Kanda's death, and go to this MP who's not from the community, but you're able to kind of effectively advocate and lobby. That MP, because he himself is not biased with his own understandings of the issue, he's not biased with his own understanding of the community. Oh, well, these guys are Munne, so I'm not going to listen to them. Or, these guys are Singhs, but they tie their pug this way, so I'm not going to listen to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not bunkered down by their own biases or misinformed opinions because, they grew up in the community, but they're not necessarily part of the community, or they're not deeply invested, or they have their own agenda. And I use these terms kind of loosely. That Goda's just going to listen to whatever you're saying. He's going to take the report, and he's going to be like, well, this is your conclusion? Okay, I'm going to go inside and advocate on your behalf that my constituents are saying this. Their treatment of the issue is different. And again, this is not us making this up. There's a report that actually kind of delved into this and kind of explored these topics. And there's been a lot of interesting research from Canada as well on kind of, the value of political engagement for
just to give an example of the other side of that. So have you guys heard of MP Bob Blackman?
Yes.
So he's get the same thing, right? He gets third party groups from the Hindu RSS community have obviously lobbied him.
Yeah.
And he's gone into parliament and said Sikhs are terrorists.
Yes.
Which is just crazy.
It's crazy.
Insane.
Especially with the history of Sikhs in this country.
Yes.
This blows me away. Right? It really does, right? The fact that we even in the UK, we struggle with these issues, having the history and all that we have, right?
Yeah.
But do you think there's any benefit of having Sikh representation as an MP?
So my opinion on this is you need both. You need very strong Sikh representation. It's important to have that. And again, you guys have MPs that have done good work as well. But you also need strong, unified Sikh advocacy, which I don't know if that's necessarily the state of affairs currently in the UK. In Canada, it's very clear who your advocacy organization is. It's a WSO, right? That's the only show in the town. But as an organization, we do a great job of ensuring that it's reflective of the Sikh community, right? Where two shameless Monnik and that I think decent human beings and good at what they do are part of the team. Where you have guys like Balpreet.
What are some ways that you check yourselves and that you are actually giving the views of the Sikh community?
Well, so in Australia when they had an accommodation issue, right, recently, because they're still kind of early stages in dealing with some of these things. One of the things that some of the orgs there were willing to agree on, we talked about this, but there on a kirpan they said, a wooden kirpan is acceptable, right? Now, as a Monna, what do I know about what is acceptable and not acceptable? I should check myself and say, I'm not going to put forward an opinion on this piece, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go talk to actual Singhs and say, why didn't you ask an actual, Amritari, person what the requirement is, right? I think that's like the basic level of check that we should do with what we do.
Like if it's like accommodation issues are a perfect example. Balpreet Singh said that. Oh, that's my position, right? Like, I don't have an opinion on it. I don't experience the day-to-day struggles of it. So who am I going to listen to? I'm going to listen to Singhs, and I'll do my best to like advocate in whatever space. And how did I get involved with WSO? Was literally a accommodation case of a child who was being told that he can't wear his kippah in gym class, and I went in and it's not like I want to take that case. Like I just emailed WSO straight out of law school. Balpreet Singh, I admire a lot of the work you've been doing. I've been watching for a while. I've attended events here and there. I would love to be a pro bono lawyer do some work for WSO. Balpreet's like, yeah, I have this case. I can't go to it. Can you go? Right? And that was it. That's how we started. But I didn't go into that room and be like, well, my opinion as a Munda is you could just have a butter knife. Like, it wasn't like, that's not what I was there to do.
Go to the parents. Well, are you sure your son is ready to have a kippah? Or is that okay? Yes. Again, because if you go,
did your son choose to be baptized? You know what I mean? Like, like go in with that type of mentality. Like
and so I think learning to like know your lane, right, in the Sikh advocacy is very important, right? Yeah. Like I'm not the person to go ask very detailed like questions about Gurbani, right? Like don't ask right? Like their interpretations, like that's not our space, right? Yeah. We're not here to like comment on Rat Maryada or anything of those sorts, right?
Other than that, we don't follow it. Again, we check our position is like political and
just know your lane.
Public affairs.
Know your lane, right? Yeah. And like
public affairs, I can tell you about.
I don't understand why this is so complicated sometimes, right? Of like, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't be talking about that issue, right? Stay to your lane. There's people in our community who can talk to different issues, right? And that's where it's about working with each other and finding a way. We're very, like, generally, I find in Canada, we've started to find a way to do that. But a lot of it was like calling each other out, right? Right?
Yeah. But we have thick skin. Like, we get called out all the time, both within and outside the community. And I'm totally fine with it, right? I think it's made me a better human being. And we laugh about it. There's people that I work with regularly now, like regularly work with, who at first were like, who is this guy? Stupid Munda. And like, why is he being given any platform or opportunities? And like,
he's scared of saying the word Khalistan.
Yeah.
Who's this guy?
Who's this guy? This guy, very suspicious. And you have someone like, Balpreet like, no, this is a good guy, right? And then all of a sudden, now these are the same people that were criticizing at one point, work very closely with me, and I work very closely with them, and we arm each other with the knowledge and power, right? And so...
But the point is, you have the qualified people in the right...
That's it. And so you're asking about W. So it's like, if you're obviously you have a Bantik mindset, and I think we've done a good job being very consistent on principles. You have to have, skill sets. And you have to be someone that's willing to dedicate yourself to Bantik work. Like, it's a lot. We're all volunteers. Like, the board is entirely volunteer. And what's asked of the folks on our board is a lot as well. I will give credit to our senior elders who started the organization back in '84 when they were like roughly our age. They knew at a certain point, I would say probably in the early 2000s, that they need to move on. Like, the organization is stagnant. It's not achieving. It's not operating on full throttle. All engines are not firing. It's time that we start talking about succession and bringing on new people. This is like when Balpreet Singh kind of starts taking over and starts kind of building out a team. Then that's when we start getting involved. And it was a sincere attempt at renewal. You build out their board, you start replacing folks on the board with newer folks, you're looking for young people, you're actively seeking out and asking people to join the board, adding women to the board. Like, Sikh spaces don't have a lot of women in them. That's just a reality, and Sikh orgs don't. And part of that too is like, we have to make a sincere attempt to just tell women that there's space for them, quite frankly, right?
Well, it's not enough to like reserve a couple of spots, right? Like at WSO, naturally, like women are more than 50% of our board members, right? And what you've
And
seen
that's not
is
like some woke agenda. Like, yeah, I'm just like, no, like, you know,
like, and they are like the most.
it's just they're literally very
best.
good.
Yes, they're better than the Bande.
Yes.
like
It's true, it's true.
you know, and we've seen it because if you give them the space, right, like it's amazing, right? But whereas when you just try to go with 1 to 2 and there's 10 Bande sitting there, like.
It's not inviting.
It doesn't work. How many Gurdwara committees have you seen that like fail with, right?
Yeah.
I've seen it in Canada over and over and over again. You're not creating the space for them to be able to operate, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's like making sure you attract the right people. But our seniors did a good job of that. They had this rule from the very outset in the WSO that a president couldn't serve more than 2 terms. So after 4 years, your president changes. Like no ifs or buts. It's very American. Like you can't after 2 terms continue to operate as like president of the organization. So it forces renewal at the highest level, and that's true of a lot of different kind of like how we function as an organization.
So when it comes to this like institution building, right? How do you like ensure that someone with that same mindset would then become the next president?
You know what the amazing thing is? When you have a group of people that don't want to be the Pradhan, right, and don't want the titles, that's when you know you've made it as an organization, right? Like that's when you know you have a good group of people. But coming to institution building, one of the initiatives that we started 9 years ago was our Sikh Youth Leadership Institute. It was a crisis that when we were young, because we're getting to the stage now where we need to start looking at ourselves and say, it might be time for us to move on to the pasture. But people in the community are always like, ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ leader ਬਣਨਾ, right? ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ like ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਦੇਣਾ ਆ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ. It's like they act like ਲੋਕੀ like just leader ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦੇ, right? ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ leader ਬਣਨਾ, right? Like
To be fair,
it's like a puppy, man.
to be fair, there are people who do that.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Our community has a lot of that.
There is people.
But like leader is not a thing, it's but they look at it in that context. And what we felt was, leadership is a skill. It can be trained, it can be taught, but it needs to be nurtured, right? But we didn't necessarily have that when we were there, and we wanted to fill that gap. And so we started this thing called the Sikh Youth Leadership Institute, and it was supported by, an elected official, the late Manmeet Singh Puller in Alberta. He was an MLA. He was fantastic. Mita, he was like a big brother to a lot of us. Mita got us a grant, and we were able to do a Sikh Youth Leadership Institute where we talked about like, Sikh inspired leadership, but we also had, modules on emotional intelligence, right? On nonprofit leadership. And the idea was to like start
Media training,
like
advocacy training.
And so what that does is it creates this like national sangha of like high achievers. And it's we pick the best and brightest that we can from across Canada. We get 10 times the applicants that we actually take. But what we see is so many of the graduates.
It's like getting into Oxford, it's very, very competitive, very prestigious.
Oh, wow. It's not an elitist thing. It's not an elitist thing.
No, it's not. And like we are actively like big. It's like we're not looking at grades. Like we're like, are you active in the community?
Well,
have you shown that? Like
it's a resource allocation thing. Like we don't have, like we wish we could take more, but it's a resource thing. But the beautiful thing is that what it does is so many now of our board members, like our current Pradhan, was a graduate of that program. Right. And, now, he's leading this organization. So many of the board members are people who graduated from that.
BCVP is a silly grad.
That's right. And so I think we're very proud of the fact that program has created, this pipeline of young talent, right? That has and is engaged with the organization, is engaged with it. But until you create the space for them to do things like, for example, like Jaskaran said, take those opportunities to speak in media. You only can get better at this by doing this, right? I get to do a lot of the Punjabi like language stuff, right? Jaskaran gets to do a lot of the the CNN. Yeah, I would love a CNN once in a while.
Right? There's like generational players, Messi, Ronaldo, right? They're gonna play certain games, and then there's guys like. Okay, you'll be fullback again.
And like,
you know what I mean? Like, but that's important.
Yeah.
Like you're Maguire. You're Maguire.
Whoa.
I'm Ronaldo.
Whoa. No, that's not how this works. No, it's just some guys are just more blue collar, right? I'm just like the Alan Shearer of like strikers, right? Like someone like Flash and all that. No, I put the goals in, but I do the Punjabi language.
Yeah.
Uncle
Rooney before the hairplan.
They like me throw me on the uncle circuit, right? That's my jam. That's what I do. Uncle, yeah. I can see kind of young, yeah. At least at least my bottle are still here. So like that's a big difference.
God made me away.
It's all hookup. It's true.
Until I go to Turkey, you know.
Best place. But I think, you know, when you talk about giving those opportunities to Naujawan, giving those opportunities for people to get involved and engaged and start to play those roles, like that's what you need to do. You have to give them meaningful things. You can't just expect them to show up one day and say, okay, asi pradhan banna hona, asi board member banna hona. Like, what are you doing to actually give them meaningful opportunities and actually respecting the decisions they made? When the Bajorgs gave us the opportunity to do Seva with WSO, there wasn't conditions attached, right? There was not strings attached.
That's an important point.
You know, and I think that is the way you have to operate. You have to trust the next generation. Every generation is going to say, no, thonu nahi pata, right? You know, thada kera experience banya. Definitely, you know, look to your Bajorgs for that experience and knowledge and take that. But you have to trust the next generation.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example that Harman gave. See, I can say nice things too.
Oh, wow.
Unlike you.
That's how I know I made a really good point. Thank you.
No, but like when we kind of came onto WSO, yeah, we were given the freedom to like do stuff. Now, up until that point, and this is about 10 years ago is when the succession planning kicked in and everything kind of changed. But up until that point, WSO was very much government relations and legal work. Right? Government relations just on the lobbying side, engaging with MPs and all that kind of stuff. And then on the legal side, like accommodation battles, Kakadu battles. Like we're in a position now as a community where it's not necessarily new laws being made. We're just refereeing, ensuring the ones that we
A lot of hard hat issues now with like gas masks.
Yeah,
post-COVID.
yes, those things are still popping up, but like the underlying like legal principle of like religious accommodation, like WSO won those battles like at the Supreme Court level decades ago, and now it's like ensuring that they're followed, that everything's happening properly, especially with the influx of so many like students who just don't know their rights, making sure they understand that. But like traditionally WSO, that was like the bread and butter of what they did. What we realized with the success, because the uncles, the Buzurga gave us the space to do it, that there's a lot of initiatives that the community needs to support stuff that's very important to the community that still lend themselves to WSO's mandate to protect and promote the interests of Sikhs. In Canada, we got to kind of think outside the box, outside the norm of legal and just GR and legal. And we got to start thinking about other spaces where there's a need, but no one else is servicing. And then that's the other thing. Like WSO doesn't, like we're not trying to launch even basicers of Sikhi, right? Like, like we're not trying to do that, right? We're not trying to launch, well, Khalsa Super Ultra Aid. Like, we're not trying to do stuff like that, right?
Name.
Yes, I know. Yeah, it's like you guys have like a Supreme Sikh Council, like Ultra Supreme Sikh Council.
Universe.
Yeah, Universal.
Yeah, Sikh Council.
That's the next one.
And this is not a knock against any of them. I'm sure they're all doing great work. But like the point is, we know our lanes. Let's not cross into other people's lanes. Where there's something's already established. And
I've seen some like Sikh orgs in the UK who like don't know their lane, right? Like, you know, like some Sikhs who are in the city don't know the lane they should be in.
Yes.
Right? Like, why do you
a lot of Sikhs in cities.
Yeah, like, you know, they don't know, right? Like, why? You're in the city.
Yeah, you're a city Sikh.
You're like, you don't know, like, you don't know
rural Sikhs.
right?
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I don't understand that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
But I'm a Sikh in a city, and I know
I'm
that,
a city Sikh too.
but we know that we don't talk about certain, we don't deal with certain.
But I know
issues.
I'm a Brampton city. I'm not Toronto.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's so the point that I was making. Well, that's a good point on city Sikhs in general, like lowercase city, uppercase Sikh. That we launched a lot of different initiatives as a result of renewing the board. Like we launched the Sikh Youth Leadership Institute was something we did. That's now like 10 years in, over 100 alumni. And that's not just like, oh, this is like a factory for WSO workers. Like majority of them have gone on to do stuff for other works.
Yeah, that's
Harman Singh with Basic Sikh, he was actually, he went through the Sikh leadership.
He's a Jaskaran Singh as well, right?
Yes. How much he credits, his success to, that's silly, that's for you guys to ask. But the point being is like, we're so proud to see them go do other things and be part of other organizations. And like, I love keeping tabs on all of them. I really do. And then a lot of them reach out to us all the time, like, job advice, career advice. Like one of the key pieces here is we want to ensure that if young Sikhs are going to go succeed in places like Canada or the UK, It's that they don't feel that they succeeded in spite of the community. That they succeeded because of the community, right? And that helps amplify our GR battles. It helps amplify our press media battles, like, because now you have a group of Sikhs that truly believe that the Sikh community faces certain issues, and these are certain types of things we got to start talking about as a community. It helps amplify one another into into spaces where we just weren't before. So like Silly is a great example of that. Sikh Mentorship program, where we pair up young Sikhs with folks in like professional kind of careers, because again, our community succeeds if our folks are financially stable, right? If they're doing well, if they're pursuing kind of careers that they want to do, they have passions that they believe in. Well, we have folks that have succeeded in those spaces. Well, let's have you talk to each other.
Well, the success stories are really.
Oh, it's so touching. Like I ran into folks just last year, like on two different occasions. Folks that I remember that they went through the Sikh Mentorship program, because there's like 100+ people that participate every year. And they're like, hey, Jaskaran, how are you? Good. I went through a Sikh Mentorship program. Like, you may not remember this or anything, but the guy that the mentor that you linked us up with, it changed my life. I was gonna go, like, I didn't know my potential, and like now look at me, like I'm killing it. I'm in this, I'm in that. And, like, you hear stories like this pretty regularly. It's amazing. Sikh Family Helpline was something we did.
Well, like, it just kind of downplays, like, in that particular situation, the alternative was, he's going down a dark path. Right. And he really credited going through Sikh Mentorship program to say, you saved me from, something that was definitely not in my best interest, but that was the path I was on. And I recognize that now. I didn't at the time, but it's something that really fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah. The Sikh Family Helpline. Now it's like, it's a hub for international students that need help. Like, I mean, like, that's an outlet for them. And like, we get them, we try our best to like keep up. That's a demanding thing to do. And that's something I think we want to focus on a little bit more and kind of beef up. But like, there's a lot of different initiatives that we started that were outside the traditional, like, this is how we do things at WSO, but it was a product of a renewal at the board level. And now, like, WSO has become like this robust, holistic organization that's not kind of like existing out here in the ether. Like, it's very hard to explain to just a normal person, what like legal battles are, what government relations is, what's public affairs. Like, it's so abstract and like up in the ethers. Whereas I understand Langar Seva. Right? And again, these things are important. These are not a knock, but I understand Langar Seva. I understand humanitarian seva. I understand, all these things. I don't see your GR legal like that. Just I can't give you something tangible to hold in your hand. But when you start seeing the initiatives that kind of attach to that same themes of like building up capacity in our community, okay, well, now I can see it. And so that has borne a lot of fruit for the community, for the organization, but even just at the institutional level, like, understand your lane, understand where there's gaps right now in services, and are you the best equipped to help on that? And if you're not, don't be afraid to talk to other folks about how do we address this. So even the Sikh Family Helpline, we first went and talked to Punjabi Community Health Services, PCHS, which is like a large kind of like agency in Canada now. We talked to them first. Like, are you guys doing something like this? Are you planning to do something like this? If we were getting in space, would you be willing to give us help? And they were, right? That's proper organizing at a community level. We called Sikh Family Center in California, which already exists, and had a similar hotline. Hey, we saw what you guys are doing. It's wonderful. Are you guys planning to come up here, or do you mind giving us advice because we want to establish something up here first, right? Oh, no, we would rather help you guys. We want to just deal with America because like there's jurisdictional issues, whatever. Okay, great. Well, we'll set it up here. Give us like your best practices. Like, we have to be a little bit more sophisticated in how we do things as well as a community, and not be afraid to talk to one another.
Well, and it goes beyond just like talking to community. I know an example locally where we have a lot of people who want to do Langar Seva with, inner city communities, homeless communities, right? They go out there, they do the Langar. And it becomes like, again, when you're not doing consistently, it's not the same institution, right? But when you went, like in our city, where we went out and we wanted to do some Langar Seva, we went and we talked to the different agencies, in the mainstream, and said, is food insecurity an issue? And they're like, no, we've got that covered, right? Like, like, that's not necessarily the problem, right? There's other issues that we need to address. But one of the directions that we were pushed to was, we'd found out that there was a school, an inner city school, where kids were going hungry. Right? Because we went and had those conversations and said, where's the need, right? Let's not just assume And let's not just do it because we want to be able to put it on Facebook and show everybody, okay, look, we feel good about ourselves, right? Like, we need to actually figure out where gaps exist and help to fill those, working together within our own community, but also outside of the community, right? Like, and I think that conversation happens too, is, so many people look at Gurukar and say, well, the Gurukar should solve all these different, issues, right? They should fill all these gaps. Are they missing on a lot of things? Yeah, absolutely, right? And there's a lot of conversation that we can have, and I love talking about governance when it comes to Gurdwara, but there's space for people to fill those gaps, right? And orgs need to do a lot of that work to say, well, like, that's something that's supposed to be in our lane, right? And like in the Canadian context, like, you have some Gurdwara that are very good in the advocacy space, but not all of them, right? You have umbrella organizations, but like the WSO is there to support those that don't know how to navigate these issues, right? Or like what the messaging should look like, or what the conversation, because again, like, a politician's going to approach them and want to speak on stage, or, there's that like, oh, we're going to give them a saropa because, MP, MLA, right? We have to reevaluate that relationship and say, we're not going to just do this blanket anymore. We need to work with each other. And that's where Gurukar need to work with organizations like us, everywhere, and people need to understand those things, right? So, to your point, I think it's not just within the community, but it's also with other agencies, other groups as well, which we've done a lot of.
Yeah. A lot of that stakeholder like engagement. And understanding, like, having honest conversations, like, this is not worth our time anymore, or like, this project is not worth our time anymore. Like, understanding when, like, something's just not, it's just a drag. Like, I do believe in, like, addition by subtraction sometimes. And just being very focused on your mandate. Is this actually achieving what we think it's achieving? Okay, if it's not, well, let's let it go. If it is, okay, well, then let's double down on it. And just being able to understand, like, strategically where you want to be, what are you actually trying to achieve? Okay, and then thinking about what tactics do we want to employ. And even then, are other people already doing something similar? Let's not double the resources there. In fact, we can offer them a helping hand when they're doing something. Let's focus on our projects. I think that's very important if you want healthy institutions. The problem becomes is you have like 6-7 different institutions all trying to do and claiming to do the same thing. It's just a lose-lose. Like, the community does not win in that situation. You do not think, you're not getting the blah you think you're getting. The community thinks you're ridiculous, right? And I've been on the other side of, like, seeing organizations, and now I'm like nose deep into like WSO and like Baaz and stuff like that. But there was a point in time where I wasn't, and I remember looking like, these guys are just, this is a joke. Like, what is this, right? There's no, like, I don't know, there's no kursi. Like, you get that kind of mentality out of your head, like that sardari, like, kind of like mentality of, like, this is like, I want to be the one that's in power, and like, this is what I'm, and no one respects that. At the end of the day, no one actually respects it. Everyone kind of, laughs in the background when they see folks trying to flex on things like this. You build these institutions with, like, the honest intention of doing good for the community, and that it would exist even if you removed yourself. That's when you built a strong organization. If it's just a cult of personality, then you failed. Your organization failed, and the community is going to fail. And I don't think that's, like, even like Sikhi kind of principles. That's not how we operate. It's not how we've built ourselves as a community. And we can't just lose track of that because, well, if I'm the leader of this community, I'll get accolades at Parliament or something. What's the big thing here? OBEs and MBAs. Like, I'm going to be an emperor's child or something, right? Like okay, like, whatever, you want to pursue awards that you think are important, go ahead. Like, that's not my cup of tea.
These
But
titles feel so like galam.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the context is in UK, but like, as Canadians who, yes, like the Rani or Honkia, like the king,
Diana's former husband.
Yeah, that's right. We're all pro Diana. We're all team Diana, right?
Yeah.
But like, to see people, like, fall over themselves for, like, these titles of the British Empire, strange. Don't understand this.
I've always had, like, this, like, dream, like, being awarded something like this, and then just grabbing, smashing to the ground. I'm like, I rejected this award. Like, just build it up for that. Anyways, so
they're not giving you one.
Honestly, you're not going to get one now. Especially saying
just joking, guys. I won't do that.
Wait, are you going to Westminster today?
Yes, I am. And
So let's see what you do.
Supposedly have a meal in front of
Yeah, don't they like touch you on the both shoulders?
That's
like
right.
a sword?
That's right. That's right. We all live, contradictory lives, guys. We all live contradictory lives.
Especially as Monday.
Especially as Monday. That's right. With zero moral compass.
Can you speak a bit about Baaz as well? Because you spoke about WSO. How did Baaz come about?
Yeah, Baaz, again, was a product of this feeling that there are certain stories that, yes, it's a benefit to the community if those stories are led or are broken in the mainstream.
Yeah.
As diasporic Sikhs. There is. And there's moments where, I'll be quite frank, Baaz had stories and we let the mainstream break it first. Okay? Because there's instances where the mainstream can do justice to a story and it will have in public interest, a better impact.
Yeah.
And for obviously a Sikh community interest, but a public interest, it'll have a bigger impact. And so we try not to throw resources into stories like that. That's one. Number two is sometimes just breaking news type stories that we just aren't equipped to tackle. Again, there's knowing what we can do and what we can't do. I don't have a slate of 10 full-time reporters just pursuing breaking news. Just be
This room has more resources than Baaz.
Yes, yeah. These cameras alone are very intimidating. No, but just understand where your strengths are and what's the actual need of the community. The need of the community is Facebook pages, like us. Facebook pages exist, meme pages exist. Punjabi radio exists, ethnic TV exists. PTC exists. All these channels exist that can do that kind of breaking. A car hit a pole, that type of breaking news stuff. There's no value add on that. Where there was a gap was good quality, investigative kind of work. There was a gap on good quality opinions and analysis. And then there was a gap on a good quality original reporting, diving into an issue. And when we saw the need on these these pillars that really could only be solved if we had a strong diasporic focused news outlet. I'm a big believer in print. It has a historical value. It's easy to archive. It's easy to search. It's easy to quote. Video is great. The algorithms love videos. But the reality is it's hard to quote back to a video. It's hard to transcribe a video. It's hard to share a video. Print is the first thing that gets shared into your WhatsApp groups, just as an example, right? It's the first thing that gets texted. It's the first thing that you'll post on a post and then it's the first thing you're going to copy and highlight. It's the first thing a student at a school is going to insert in their bibliography of their school report. You know what I mean? It's that's very important. To me, print isn't critical. And so, Baaz was formed to tackle Sikh issues with a mind towards these things, right? So we don't waste resources trying to be the first one out the gate. Now, often we are, and that's just, I think, a product of our success that, people share information with us because they trust us. Sometimes we've acted as a verifier of facts, something that's already been circulating on social media. You're not going to beat social media. Social media is going to beat everyone. And mainstream legacy news has realized this as well. But our job is to verify it. Yeah. And okay, then when it comes that we shared it, we may have shared 12 hours after the fact it's gone up on social media, but people can trust that we verified that information, that this is legit. And we can add a little bit more details on it. So we do serve some of that breaking news need, but it's not necessarily what our priority is. What we really like is investigatory work and opinions and analysis that the mainstream just will never tackle, right? They're just never going to tackle that. Obviously, they love the Hardeep Singh Nijjar story after Trudeau stood up in Parliament, after he revealed what happened. Before that point, Baaz had already written 6-7 articles on the same topic, right? From different perspectives, with different sources, with different information. So once that story broke, guess who was reaching out to me after reading those stories to get more insight about the articles they're going to publish? It was major news agencies, right? It was major news agencies reading our stuff to get a grasp on what is the community's perspective on it. That's the role of Baaz, right?
UK example, great UK example is, even till today, what is, the best source for information on the West Midlands 3 case, is the Baaz story on it,
Mm.
right? You know, there's a significant, you know, geopolitical story that got almost no mainstream coverage, right? The only place that you can find, you know, an actual like article written on this is Baaz. Like, it blows my mind, like the fact that, you know, like what happened in that case and how that was treated, and, you know, the aftermath of that did not make it to transcend. But if that story's not written, you know, you lose that record.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so what are the most read stories on Baaz right now from the last 3 years? Like the most read story, number one, I think, was a deep analysis on the RSS anti-Sikh history that only exists on Baaz, right? Because those are also stories like India-based media or Punjab-based media can't publish. It'll either get censored, like to where we started this, we come full circle. Either it'll get censored, or like the reporters like fear for their life. And they actually do. Like there's some good journalists in Punjab just fear for their life. They just can't touch the stories. You know, that's our number one read story. During the farmers' protest, what's our second most read story? I believe is number 2 right now. Is we did an investigative piece before anyone else did on how the BJP IT cell works, because we got access to 2 or 3 people in the cell. They disclosed everything. We saw everything. That's like our second most read piece, and that was during the farmers' protest. It's like, okay, have you noticed these like bot accounts attacking you and like this vile stuff? Well, let us explain what that is. That's our second most read article. Another one, just for your sake, wrote this piece on like why Rishi Sunak may be a problem for the Sikh community. It's a huge piece, like tens of thousands of like, I'm talking about like, social media, you hit crazy numbers. Like the people that actually opened the article and read all like 2,000 words, like this is tens of thousands, right? Like people are getting that insight from a Sikh perspective on why Rishi Sunak may be a problem for the community. Why there's not some big win for like the Punjabi community, because he is Punjabi in the background, or like the Indian community. Like why would some from these diaspora communities have an issue with someone like Rishi Sunak being in power? Like this is like a critical insight you're not going to get anywhere else. And ethnic media is just not equipped to tell those stories. The journalistic practices are not there in a lot of cases. Like their purposes are different. You know, the Instagram pages, the Facebook pages that are popular, and there's a bunch like Sikh Expo, for example, Free Punjab. Like these are great IG pages that share a lot of information. But Instagram is not designed for like deep analysis, right? Like it's like quick slides, like 10 words on each slide. That's what it's designed for. Or like breaking instant, like just posting something right away. Whereas again, our attention with Baaz is like a deeper analysis. Even on Instagram, we just reproduce our entire article. Like, we're not dumbing it down for like the platform, because we know that's not our space, right? Like that's not what we're trying to achieve. There's other people already doing that and doing a great job at it. And then Twitter is obviously our platform of choice for Baaz, again, because it's just a media. Twitter is where the media is, where you have analysis that's beyond what you'll find on our website or articles. And that's where you'll find more of the breaking news kind of stuff, or the verification, or fact checks, or disinfo checks. And what we found is our readership on the website. First of all, Instagram, the website, and Twitter are 3 completely different like people. Like they're completely different people that follow us on those 3 respective things. What's popular on like our critique of destination weddings, and so we'll take credit for the SGPC's declaration that destination weddings are banned. But the piece on destination weddings on Instagram was super viral. Not so on Twitter. It was whatever, right? Like it's like a different demographic. But our stuff on like Bhai Amritpal Singh, like our content on that was like super viral on Twitter, right? It did well on Instagram at a certain point when it became like a big issue. But there is a difference. Like the audiences are different, right? But the one consistency across platforms, and we've been very cautious of ensuring, is that our readership and our numbers are not inflated by like readership in India. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not, like it's not just random clicks. We're very mindful of our audience's diasporic Sikh community, because there's a lot of content already being generated in Punjab and India. Like Sikh Siyasat, for example, there's a lot of reporting, like good reporting on Sikh issues in Punjabi and Gurmukhi. Like we're not there to compete with that. Yeah. And in fact, we work with one another. Like we often are talking to one another. Our job is, again, English level, English medium, diaspora communities, to engage folks who otherwise wouldn't be engaged in these topics, or engage folks who are looking for deeper analysis. And so our numbers are almost exclusively coming from Australia, US, UK, Canada, almost exclusively. And then like obviously the smaller diaspora communities. Our engagement is all coming from there. Our numbers are all coming from these communities. And so within the diaspora community, it's been pretty crazy how in the last 2 or 3 years, we're going to be 3 years in January, how we have become like an outlet of record for the diaspora. And we have, like, it's not like just self-pump. In fact, like I try not to believe it. But I'll run into like random people. Like I went to some, it was like a police information session on some like issues right now in the community or something like that. Like across the board. It wasn't just like up and in there. And like I go sit down and like I was a little late, and in between the breaks, talking to different folks outside, inside. I had more than one person ask me like, Jaskaran Sandhu, like Baaz News? I'm like, yeah. Oh, interesting. I'm like, on what way? And I was like, oh, no, we're with you. Okay. I'm like, man, we're reporting the facts, man. We're just reporting the facts. But the point being is like, it's penetrated in a way, because we're not, at the same time, we're not just exclusively looking at this single like story set. Like, we've written stories that are very mainstream. Like AP Tillon doesn't have brown girls in his music videos. Like that's the Punjabi side of Baaz, right? But the person coming in to read that, which by the way is in the thousands, okay? Like people want to read that stuff because of like the larger kind of cultural issues. That article is actually about colorism. That's what it was actually about. But they're coming to read that. They're staying for the 2-part interview with Bhai Amritpal Singh, right? And then there's people coming to read Bhai Amritpal Singh, falling upon the AP Tillo thing, and then emailing us like, you idiots, you suck. How dare you waste time on these issues? And it's just like, man, I wish I could show you like how this works, right?
Yeah.
And you can't neglect.
The funny thing is, the same thing is with Basic Sikhi.
Yeah.
Like you have people who come only watch the debates with the like Muslims and all this, but then people don't realize from that video they'll go and watch Japri Sahib Katha or like something else.
Yeah.
They'll get like a deep dive on Sikhi.
That's
That
right.
was just the hook.
Yeah.
Grab them in.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's important stories to tell. I look, I love music. I love Punjabi music. I have since a young age, including the UK scene. The UK scene is what got me into like Punjabi music. But I was actually talking to Harman, like, let's go see where the B21 used to live and stuff, right? I want to go to the B21.
Dude, man, because we just expected like just to see the walk down the street.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I thought like Raf Sapero.
Sing Chandigarh.
I thought like Raf Sapero would be hanging out.
Yeah.
Like,
Where's Raf Sapero? I haven't seen him yet.
you know, and I just saw like people like walk down the street with stereos.
Yeah. Like, where's the whole South Hall scene?
Yeah.
No, but
It's not what I thought it was going to be.
Maybe in the summer.
maybe the summer. That's why I thought the summer is probably where we're gonna have Raf Sapero on the side. No, but like it's just I'm myself intrigued by these topics. I actually really enjoy them. I like them. But I think there's like a deep analysis that you can tell that exposes like cultural. Like,
Should Diljit be playing Shaheed Jaswant Singh Kalra?
yes,
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
which was a Shamsher piece.
yes.
Which
Fantastic piece.
like Diljit had to put a statement out as a result of that piece, right? And I have folks in the family who love Diljit. Like, just going, how dare you?
I think we're
How dare you publish that? I'm just like, yeah, I love Diljit too. I'm not actually that harsh of a critic of the man, but there's a point in this article.
Yeah.
Can he actually play? And it's not arguing that Diljit artistically capable of being like Jaswant Singh Kalra. That's not what's being argued. It's is the system that exists today gonna allow a Punjabi / Bollywood, I think it's actually a Hindi language movie, to accurately portray who Shaheed Jaswant Singh Kalra was, right? Like, are they going to show a picture of him sitting at a desk where it says Khalistan Zindabad with like a flag? You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to show that. No. The speech that he gives and what he says in the speech, are they going to actually allow Diljit to like share that in its full like way? Are they going to like slice and dice it? My understanding is they slice and dice it, right? But the point being is
He actually came here and filmed a few scenes.
yeah. Shamsher was talking to me about it. I think Shamsher like accidentally fell upon it. But like Shamsher Singh, wrote a great piece. And look, Shamsher Singh's a guy who shitted on me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, fine, I don't care. Like, I like your pieces. Keep publishing, please. Right? So the point being is like there's like incredible insights You should
Should have not be in Sikh spaces.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's. I will never publish that piece, but I'll take it and I'll look at it. No, the point being is like there's a lot of really interesting topics that there just never was a space to talk about that are interconnected with other bigger issues. And if we start like believing that everything kind of operates in a vacuum with one another, like we're doing a disservice to the 99% of the community who is just, doesn't understand like every minute detail of what's going on because they're too busy in their life. And that's not unique to our community. That's every community. That's humanity in general. Like it's a small core group that thinks about these issues on a daily basis. And there's a large group of people who are sympathetic, who care, who understand like when issues flare up, that they want to read about it, but they don't know where to go. Yeah. And they don't know how to articulate their feelings, or they don't understand, again, every intricate detail and how things are connected. So our job is to connect, the thought leaders. Not everyone's a thought leader, but like our job is to connect that thought leadership and that original reporting and the investigations, because I have time to sit there and look at like, who's working at the Ottawa High Commission? Well, these two guys have like a raw background. Like, what the hell? Okay, well, we should write about this. We publish it 1 week later, like, agents within the High Commission are expelled from Canada. We have the power to provide that. And I know myself 15 years ago, and so that's why I go look back at like Jaskaran, of like 20-year-old Jaskaran, who cared about these issues but didn't really have time to think about them too deeply, would love to have a Baaz.
So what inspired you to take the step forward?
Look, I think during the farmers' protest, we all felt like farmers' protest was a special moment in like our community's history. And I think there's a lot of ICTA that came out of the farmers' protest, a lot of capacity that was built out of the farmers' protest. Like a lot of the folks that, we've met over the course of the last 2-3 days that we're going to be here, even us coming to this the event this evening at Westminster, is a result of networks and connections we made during the farmers' protest in many ways, right? Like that's how we kind of all learned about one another. And during that time, there was this desire and this understanding that there's folks in our community who really cared what was happening. Again, that like 90% group. Like farmers' protest is where you really saw evidence of this. Like the mass people were like they're just hungry for information, and just didn't have access to credible, verifiable, good quality reporting on what was happening and transpiring in Punjab. And especially that second, third generation, like diasporic Sikh community, just didn't have access to it, didn't know where to go, didn't trust, the Hindustan Times or the Times of India-esque like reporting, what just hit it. Like sometimes they do decent reporting, but then sometimes they have like straight propaganda inserted, right? Like it's hard to decipher what's right and what's not. And you have like, again, your meme type pages and your Facebook kind of pages, which are great. But are they giving enough like in-depth analysis and original, like those pages are not generating original reporting in most cases. Like, so are they getting a true insight of what's happening right now? And so that was where it became very clear to me and the others on the team, like Harman, that we need to launch something now and ensure that we're able to provide this, and then we'll see where it goes. And it's exceeded our expectations. To be quite frank, it really has exceeded our expectations. And it's crazy because like, we got calls from like Vice World News when Amritpal stuff was going on. Like we want to quote, okay, like you want, like you calling me out my W side. No. We want to quote from Baaz, right? We've had pieces. I think it was that same Vice piece, and this Vice piece was like, I think became like the like viral piece up by Amritpal Singh, who literally lifted entire sections out of our interview with him and published it. We have India media that had lifted entire sections of our interviews with Amritpal Singh for their articles. Like that's just one example, right? And we see this over and over again. Like when major news outlets reach out, and often it's because they found us, they follow Baaz. I know who subscribed to our emails. Like there are people sitting at major media outlets. There are people sitting in high commissions and consulates of not just the Canadian and Indian government. Like there are people sitting inside universities. There's people sitting in institutions that are taking advantage, rightfully so, in a way that we hope they would, of insights into our community that help them provide something that's more informed. And so it's exceeded our expectations. And I think we're very happy and blessed by the response. Look, everything happens in Moj. We're just vehicles, for what God has been planned for us. But we're happy to play our role, like for the month. Like we really are. And it doesn't come without its stresses, right? It's not easy on family. And put aside just the hours you got to throw at it. Like when things go insane, and you guys are gonna be like, well, you should be waking up at that time anyways. I'm waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. and like, my Simran in the morning is opening the computer and like editing those, like, you know what I mean, and reading that. Like that's what all my mind is focused on. Like, and sometimes I go to sleep. I'm like, shit, should I go to sleep or should I go do that? You know what? I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and do it. Like there's stretches of that. There's stretches where folks that I work with, like, are you here completely? Like, are you thinking about something else? Right? Like, you have to deal with that, and that's fine. It is stressful on family though. Like, go on my Twitter and look at the responses I get. Like death threats daily, right? And especially in this certain context. Now, CSIS, RCMP, I've not been warned at all, right? And to be quite frank, I'm not the kind of folks they're targeting. They're targeting folks that are very hard advocates for Khalistan, or advocates for the Khalistan referendum. That is what, at least at this point, looks like is their main targets. Not to say that they haven't threatened other Sikh advocates, they have. But it's not easy on family, and I'm very cognizant of that. But at the same time, we've been taught that we do not shy away from the hard battles just because of a fear that there's folks that will be challenging us for our positions on those hard battles. Like we can't decouple our spiritual growth and pursuit from the social and political good of the people. And like you guys can correct me on this, and I've been spending more time like reading this up, partly because of the event we're going to, where Baaz is getting recognized, which is again like insane to me. That they're getting recognized in a space like this in UK, but with the APPG group and like the organizations here, of like what was Guru Nanak's message for us as Sikhs, and part of that, like you can't decouple, like you read something like Baba Ramani, like Guru Nanak Dev Ji is like really deeply like concerned about the commoners being punished, right, as part of the conflict with the Mughals and the Pathans, right? And like Baba, a vehicle for like God's will and all this stuff, and so recognizing God's greatness. But Guru Nanak Dev Ji doesn't like just turn his back on the commoner pain, right? Like he pines for them. He says like, look at them, like look at what their state is, look at what they're suffering. As Sikhs, like we can't just turn our back on that. That's not what we're taught. And that our own pursuit, like for like a pursuit of justice, pursuit of ensuring that folks are free from oppression, and that like we're building kind of like a just world around us. Like again, it's not decoupled from personal spiritual growth. And I'm not a guy who kind of gets too deep on like the religious side, just because I know my own shortcomings in that space. But that speaks to me, right? And so when we look at Baaz, I see it as a platform for the Panth. I see it as a platform for the community. To your point, the sacrifices that go into it is to ensure like like my kids grow up in a space where like these are the conversations that are happening and we're allowed to have them. Like again, we've existed for about 3 years. We've now published, I think we just hit or about to hit 400 articles we've published over the last 3 years. And again, we're not the type that's just publishing an article every time like something happens. Like only if there's like some interesting analysis provided. So we've published about 400 of these now, and we've had over or at about 100 different contributors, right? Like that's a huge, diverse array of opinions and thoughts and writing styles and what have you that now exist like in the world and that are there, that are archived, that will be there hopefully for a very long time, that can always form as like a basis. The saying is journalism is like the first draft of history. Like that exists now that it didn't exist before. And so I think that's what we believe our duty is. We believe that's the value that we add with Baaz. And that's what we want to continue to provide. Like this platform for the community to come together and have hard conversations and, obviously and original reporting. And, with what the future has in store is anyone's guess. I guess we're one bad article from getting canceled, which has happened.
No, but do you know what? It's
Yes.
Yes. And I was going to say, it's not possible without, the support that we get from Sangat. We're funded by Sangat. I think I look at the countless hours that Jaskaran as editor spends and it just amazes me, right? Unpaid Seva, and we try to compensate our journalists ethically and the best we can. And that wouldn't be possible without the Sangat support. We'd be remiss not to mention our the other members of the team, and including Darshan, who I it's always funny to me because I always just see the messages of Jaskaran bothering Darshan to get up, the post onto Instagram to do this, demanding it. And member of Baaz who doesn't get a lot of recognition, for a lot of the Seva that happens. It just reminds you that in every org that you see, in every, there's people who are doing the work behind the scenes, right? And it's a collective effort. So, I think one of the things for us is, we always need more support from Sangat to continue to do the things that we do. And we always want to help platform, new authors and new journalists and people with opinions. We want to encourage people to reach out to Baaz. If you have something to say, reach out. It's important for you to put those thoughts out there. It's important for people in our column to start writing again, right? Just doing tweets is not enough, right? Build those thoughts out, put it out there, expand on what you're thinking, bring the intellectualism back to the discourse that we have within community. And I think that's part of what, we talked about was taking what we had, which was like people with strong opinions, and saying, put it into long form, right? Write it out, go through your argument, think about what you need to say and be able to articulate that, and helping to develop and create the space for that, I think is really critical, right? Because you want the community to push in that direction.
See, we'd be serious too.
I was about to say that. I was very serious.
You know what, now with AI and these type of things, ChatGPT, a lot of the articulation is going even further down the drain because people are just generating articles or videos or whatever. And
and look, I think AI can be a valuable tool. I'm not like an AI naysayer. Yes, AI can generate an opinion piece probably pretty quickly. But for us, half the interesting part of an opinion piece is the person who wrote it. That's what actually makes it interesting. The best opinion pieces are when you could say, okay, this person who's seen as as someone whose thoughts on these matters are important, and also kind of our weather vane of what direction the community may be going. That's half a value of an opinion piece. That's actually what's really critically important. That can't just be replicated by AI. The human kind of experience is an integral part of what's been written. Again, you just can't decouple that from, that's what AI kind of lacks. Now, I don't know, we make pieces where people use AI and then after adjust it, okay, we'll see when it happens, and if it comes, what we make of it. But I think AI can be a tool. Now, original reporting you can't replicate with AI, because that requires investigatory work. That requires talking to actual people for their thoughts. That stuff just won't get replicated by AI. But the opinion side, the analysis side, potentially, But at the same time, AI, I don't know how equipped AI is to tackle like Sikh Punjabi community issues.
Well, and remember, like AI is used like in a lot of media sources to generate clicks. We don't need to generate clicks.
Yeah.
When you click on our article, it's not like we get an extra cent, right? Like we're not funded by sponsors or ads.
Yeah.
We're not trying to monetize that. People pay and donate to Baaz so that we can create this original journalism, right? Like the value proposition is if you give us money, we'll create more of what we've done. And you pay for it because you value it, right? And so that is how journalism should operate. But it's not how it does. It operates based on how many eyes then watch the ads.
Yeah.
Right. And so for us, AI is just not a tool that we really need to use because we don't need the clicks. Right. Our engagement, if you look at it, we've never spent $1 trying to attract eyes to what we do. Right. Like, and we're very proud of the fact that all the engagement we have is completely genuine. Right. Like it's organic growth. We celebrate it internally, right? When we get to certain milestones, because again, we're not putting money into promotion, right? We're not trying to get into your newsfeed. We're not trying to do that. We want genuine, like we want people to share what we do and people to come to it organically. And that's what's happened. So, for us, again, AI might help, might water down the discussion, but the more that the Sangha continues to support the spaces and our platform, the better it is for that discourse, right? But again, like our shout out on everywhere we go is for people to reach out, because it is so important for our community to start this. I think when you look at like the evolution of where this discourse used to happen, go back 15, 20 years when I was young, it was like message boards, right? Like you had you had your forums, right? And that's where you used to get, that was where conversation happened. That's where discussion happened, debate happened. And over time, like where were those spaces to get the English, language stuff, right? Like the Sabhyachar stuff you have, man. Like they cover Bhangra enough, like Punjabi music. Like you don't need that, right? We don't need more of that, right? More of the Sikh stuff is very important.
Do you know what's also refreshing to see? Like earlier you said that this is fun, and it's like it's so apparent you guys take joy in this, and it's like I feel a lot of people nowadays they get trapped in kind of a victim mindset and mentality, but they don't realize you need to proactively do a lot of these things, and your guys' work is an amazing example of that. So yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Look, I can almost everything that's like every good thing, a lot of good things that have happened in our lives has been a product of us being active in these spaces. Like some of my close, like Harman, who's a brother. I know we joke and we kind of shit on each other a lot. This guy's a brother, like like a real brother. Like we travel together, our families travel together. I met him because of WSO. Balpreet Singh, someone I look to as a mentor. Now, some people will say like he hasn't mentored me enough. It's because of, it's because of WSO. Like CNN and BBC interviews. It's because of the hours we poured into like Baaz, right? Like him becoming, at least being seen as okay, these guys are legitimate voices on these spaces. I just keep going on the list. That there's so much that I can attribute just directly to community engagement and initiatives. So like if there's like a selfish argument to be made, it's like a lot of good comes out of this in your personal lives. And yes, there's challenges. There's challenges in everything, right? Like even people that are involved in nothing are still upset and angry about stuff in their lives. And people who are, sometimes are the happiest people, right? And it's one of those things. If you want something done, give it to a busy person. There's a reason for that, right? Like some people who are not afraid of like working hard on something, are folks that are appreciated and respected as well.
Yeah.
And I think and this may be like kind of like the final point here, because we did talk about a lot of stuff that kind of can be seen or deemed as like doom and gloom. I know there's a lot of these things do cast a chilling effect on members in our community who otherwise really care, or they're afraid of something, or they're scared of something, they're fearful of something, they're protective of their time. All I can say is just from a personal perspective, that when you put yourself out there, a lot of good comes from it. And I really hope that's like one takeaway that folks have. If they want, there's folks that love writing. You have a space. That's saying we work with writers. You don't have to be perfect out the gate. We'll work with you. We edit things. We look at things. We give suggestions. We help beef up articles, and that experience, that experience is what's going to take you to the next level. I can remember the first time I did a media interview. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. Right. The first time I wrote something, I had no idea. The point was that we just started. We started doing something, and we started getting more comfortable, and we started growing. It goes a long way, and it happens quickly. Like you don't realize how quick you go from like, I don't know what I'm doing to, okay, I'm very comfortable.
Well, we would be so happy to have people use the Baaz platform to then go on to better things.
Yes, and we have had that.
And we've had that. And like, absolutely, come here, start, and then go better, go bigger, like that makes us proud. When we see people who've used the Baaz platform to win journalistic awards, right? To then take jobs in mainstream media, makes us very excited and very happy that we could use this platform to help launch that, and help launch a voice that is important for our call.
Yeah, and like, I don't know why. So some people are just afraid for some reason. I don't get it. I do get it, but at the same time, like, I don't.
But you just don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't overthink.
Like when the Baaz name came up, it was literally like I was like, I like Baaz, and there's like a Baaz TV. So like different space, right? And it's like, what's her logo be? Like a Baaz, I guess. Like, why? Who? What? That's a secret. Do we have some big structure?
There was more thought. It was more thoughtful than that. But yes, part of the process was just like sometimes you're just throwing things out of wall.
You just do it. You just go.
At a certain point, you just do it. Don't let good be an enemy. Of
our logo's a big B. It's like it's a letter B. It's not complex. There's a font. There's a letter.
The slant of the B is supposed to mean like forward on it.
Right?
It's supposed to be BS. The marketing brand guys are BS.
There's no strat plan. There's no long vision document. We sat down. We had a boardroom session. Right? No, it just, you went and you did.
Yeah.
Right? And you just keep doing. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. And like this whole like the Indian interference thing. Ironically, like we may now be entering a time where it's like the safest to be like a Sikh advocate, because like India knows their own watch, right? The Americans are involved, so like I'm serious. And so like you have all these countries like looking into it. No, the UK example is a weird one, because you also have news of like the UK government reaching out to the consulate and saying like, remove your second in command raw agent and all this kind of stuff. So it's an interesting time in the Sikh community, and I just remember like me as a young person kind of like reading history, like, oh man, it would be so cool if I lived at that period of time when a lot of stuff was happening and you're in a position to kind of leave an imprint. Like every day there's an opportunity to do something like that.
Man,
right?
and I have to live the consequences of this guy reading too much history. I had to go. He took me to Stonehenge.
Yeah. It's a Neolithic site that extended into the Bronze Age.
Random patthar somebody put in like, if that was apne, we would have like turned that into somebody's house. Yeah. We would have turned those patthar down.
It would be like marble Gurdwara.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be all marble.
It would be a marble to Gurdwara in memory of the stone one that was there before.
Yeah. We thank you guys for all the work you guys do too. Like Base of Sikhs, same thing, right? Like it's huge, and the need that it originally the Judaj thing like originally went out to address, and it continues to do great work. Obviously Sikh PA, we've already given our brother Jaskaran Singh a big shout out. I think one's enough. You don't want to let it get to his head. But Sikh PA does great work. It does a lot of the work that we've already explained. And it's nice to have like an international body of sorts, like a Sikh PA working in multiple different markets and kind of making the world smaller. I think it's important that as organizations in the Sikh spaces that we do more to work with one another. Like WSO, for example, like we've done work with Sikh Coalition in America. We've engaged SALDEF, we've engaged Jakarta, we've done great work in California. Like Insaf obviously does great work. Like there's so many organizations just doing amazing
Punjab.
Yeah, Pant Punjab does great like writing as well. Like really important, like deep thinking pieces on like issues of like Khalistan and sovereignty and Sangharsh, right? Like those are critically important, and we're happy to be like allies like across the board with organizations doing great work and all the institution building. Just understand like we all have a role to play, and what is that role, and how then can we assist one another on our different mandates. that is how you strengthen the community. If there's one recommendation to the UK Sikh community on the advocacy side, as just someone who's kind of seen it from 10,000 feet, is there seems to be a lot of fracture, and it's a disservice to the community, because the UK Sikh community is the oldest in the diaspora. We should be learning from you guys, but it's for whatever reason it's a fractured space in the advocacy side. We need like really good, strong advocacy here, because the UK government is also the one that's like the coziest, at least again from the outside looking in, the coziest with the Modi government, which is again problematic in many different ways. So there's a lot of work cut out for all of us.
Just one last cheeky question before you while we have you here. So at a UN and global level, how can we make a change on that level?
So I don't know how much teeth the UN body has. That's the bigger problem. Like, is it worth kind of the resources that are required to push in it? Now, on
there's interesting history. There's history on this, right? Going back.
Well, if we could just, before we get to the history, I'll finish with this point, and then I'll let him dive into the history, because there is. But like Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination, like we're currently looking into doing something at the UN, but the problem is how much teeth do any of the bodies really have, other than to flag like this is a concern, and how much of that is a value add into what has already been kind of put out on the public record by governments, right? Yep. So that's something we're still looking into to kind of gather, what's a good step on that. So there is a role to play. It's unclear to me like how much of a hard value add that is on what we're trying to do.
No, I would just agree with that.
There is a history.
There is history.
There is a history of folks that have gone to the UN and advocated.
WSO has been there.
Yeah, WSO has been in the past.
Very, very interesting history of India blocking those efforts.
Yeah.
But again, our organizations learn lessons that the value is not there, right? What do you get other than symbolic gestures, and how does that help the column, right? I think it's questionable.
Google questions?
We'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much. You guys it was amazing to have you guys on. You guys are definitely the funniest guests that we've had on the podcast so far. But definitely very informative, and it was great to have you on. So thank you so much. And it would be lovely to do something with you guys in the future as well.
Likewise.
Why do you call
Nobody wants us on, so,
why do you